Chapter 2502. Li Fengmu watched quietly. He could feel that Bai Jian's emotions were fluctuating greatly. He must have a lot of thoughts in his mind at the moment. However, it was not that easy to dissuade him. Li Fengmu could do nothing about it. What could he do now that things had come to this? Whatever he could do and say he had already done and said long ago. If Bai Jian wanted to get out of it, he could only rely on his own abilities. If he could not see through it, he would forever be trapped in a circle. If there was no change or a great opportunity, it would still be difficult for him to get out of it. Bai Jian stared at the abyss, and his thoughts became more and more agitated. This was because he felt that he could give it another try. Perhaps there would be an unexpected gain from reviewing the past and learning new things. "Are you going to go in again?" Li Fengmu suddenly asked. Bai Jian did not say anything and nodded solemnly. He indeed had such thoughts. Since he could go in the first time, why couldn't he go in the second time? Li Fengmu frowned even more after receiving such a reply. This was because he did not expect Bai Jian to have such thoughts. What kind of place was the Sword Scar Abyss? It was a place to train one's state of mind. If one did not achieve his goal the first time, even if he went in the second time, it would not be very effective. In fact, one's original state of mind might even become more depressed and depressed due to too many hardships. "There's something that I haven't told you, because you're not in a good state and I don't know how to tell you." Li Fengmu sighed. Bai Jian was stunned for a moment. He glanced sideways at the patriarch, his eyes filled with doubt. Since the founding master sounded so solemn, it meant that it was not a small matter. In fact, it was very important to him. Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu have gone to the Wanshou realm to protect the safety of the Four Realms Alliance. They want to take the initiative to fight for more time for us. Li Fengmu sighed. In fact, Li Fengmu knew very well that they would not be able to make it. Moreover, there had been no news from them all this time, which made them even more worried. Bai Jian frowned when he heard the news. He naturally knew about the Wanshou realm. He understood how terrifying that place was. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den. However, for the safety of the Four Realms Alliance, Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu completely disregarded their own lives and left resolutely. All of a sudden, Bai Jian's heart was filled with mixed feelings. They were all fighting hard for the survival of their own worlds. Looking at himself, the decadence and idleness of the past few years, compared to them, really paled in comparison. Bai Jian smiled. His smile was very pale and helpless. Recalling the bits and pieces of the past, they were like needles piercing his heart, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Since it had already happened, he had to face it. His best friend was fighting for his life in another world. Yet he was standing here and doing nothing? Li Fengmu did not speak. He did not dare to disturb Bai Jian's contemplation. The current atmosphere had also become very subtle. Each of them had different thoughts in their hearts. Suddenly, Bai Jian smiled. His smile was very free and easy. The gloominess and depression from before were swept away at this moment. He is indeed him. His style of doing things is extraordinary. Bai Jian smiled. Li Fengmu was stunned for a moment. Bai Jian's mood had changed too much. This made it even more difficult for him to understand. Since my good brother can go and fight, why can't I? Bai Jian seemed to be talking to himself, and the confusion in his eyes began to dissipate. It was as if the previous Bai Jian was slowly recovering. Seeing this, Li Fengmu's eyes were filled with joy. That was because there was a change. The sharp aura that belonged to Bai Jian was constantly being emitted, and the decadence from before was also rapidly fading away. It was as if the genius that was praised by countless people was about to return. The surrounding atmosphere seemed to have changed because of this. It was as if there was sword aura everywhere, making people feel respect. With your current ability, I'm afraid you won't be able to make any waves in the Wanshou realm. Li Fengmu said softly. As long as Bai Jian could regain his confidence, that would be enough. However, they still had to consider some practical things. For example, with his current state, he wouldn't be of much use if he went. He might even become a burden. First-level martial emperor. That could be said to be in existence, that could be said to be everywhere in the Wanshou realm. Bai Jian smiled and said, "Then I'll break through another realm. What's the harm?" As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Jian suddenly raised his arm and shouted. Instantly, countless sword auras exploded and lined up, wantonly scattered. Looking at the crisscrossing sword auras, Li Fengmu was already in tears. In just a few words, he broke through his realm. How heroic was that? Of course, this was also in line with the previous Bai Jian. I can do whatever I want. So what if it's full of difficulties? I have 3,000 heroic spirits and sword auras. I can break through all obstacles. In the blink of an eye, the decadent youth became high-spirited again. At this moment, Bai Jian also remembered what he had experienced in the Sword Scar Abyss and what he felt. Many memories also began to come to him. The little bits of familiarity rose and fell one after another, allowing him to understand a myriad of things. Very quickly, Bai Jian absorbed all of it. "Ancestor, your sword aura has been here for too long. Why don't you lend it to me?" Bai Jian raised his arm and shouted. Li Fengmu was stunned for a moment, but in the next moment he felt an extremely powerful sword aura rising from the abyss below. In the blink of an eye, an extremely majestic sword aura had already arrived in front of them. Bai Jian leaped up and directly stepped on the seemingly illusory sword will. He was in high spirits. "Ancestor, I'm going to the Wanshou realm. Don't worry about me." After saying that, Bai Jian cupped his hands and bowed. He turned around and left on his sword. He was indescribably confident and arrogant. He, Bai Jian, was arrogant and did not stick to one pattern. Since he had an idea, he naturally had to do it. Looking at the sword light in the distance, Li Fengmu stood in the same place in a daze. He was back, and from that sword aura, Li Fengmu saw the barrier that had blocked him. Stones from other mountains could help Jade. He did not expect that this opportunity would be unintentionally given to him by a junior in his arrogance. Chapter 2503. The Wanshou realm was in an uproar because of some things that happened previously. Of course, this was only a matter between the top 10 tribes. As for the top 100 tribes, they still did not understand what was going on. Some of the news had not been spread, and there were very few people who knew about it. As a result, many people felt that it was strange. The Confusion tribe did such a thing, but the Scorching Flame tribe did not immediately start a war. This was somewhat thought-provoking. In fact, they couldn't figure out why this was happening. The Scorching Flame tribe had always had a fiery temper and would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. However, they did not do anything this time. This made people suspicious. Was it because the Scorching Flame tribe placed more importance on the big picture, or was it because the thousands of mountains were too dangerous that they did not dare to rashly start a war? However, these were just peripheral guesses. As they were not sure, they could imagine however they wanted. The current situation in the God Disaster Mountain range had indeed become very tense. Firstly, it was because the tomb was about to be opened. Secondly, they were trying their best to find the person who was secretly stirring up trouble. However, in these few days, nothing major had happened. There was not even the slightest ripple. After all, it was not an easy task to uncover a person who had the intention to hide and had extremely powerful means. Therefore, they could only take one step at a time and see what was going on. As the person who had caused such a big commotion, Xiaoyang had already mingled with some people in the Wanshou realm and appeared to be very familiar with them. Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu borrowed the identity of the Black Tiger tribe and had quietly joined forces with the tribe's powerhouse. This person was called Wild Leopard and was the tribe leader of a small tribe. He was like his name. His personality was indeed arrogant, but he was also forthright. Wild Leopard's original appearance was indeed a leopard. However, he had no connection with the multicolor tribe at all. For example, The White Bear tribe was also divided into the Bai and Bailey bloodlines. There were even more branches. However, their bloodlines were different, which was why they were separated so clearly. Everyone was clear in their hearts that wanting to get a share of the loot in the divine Disaster Mountain range was still relatively difficult with their ability. If he could have the help of his friends, that would be great. He might even be able to fight for something. Because Wild Leopard came too late, he couldn't find anyone to form a group with. By chance, he bumped into Xiaoyang and Yi Qingtang. After chatting for a while, they decided to form a group. With this blockhead by their side as a cover, they were much safer. It would be difficult for this blockhead to see any clues. Brother Heiming, I heard that the southeast is in a mess. Is that true? Wild Leopard asked curiously. Heiming was a fake name that Xiaoyang had given himself. Princess Mingzhu, on the other hand, unwillingly used a pseudonym called Heizhu, which made her feel that something was wrong. When she came back to her senses, she almost drew her sword and slashed Xiaoyang. However, because Wild Leopard was present, she had no choice but to suppress that thought. Xiaoyang nodded with a smile and said, "That's right. The Tiger King was plotted against, and the 4 tigers were killed one after another. Our Black Tiger tribe couldn't hold on any longer, so everyone could only run on their own to avoid being exterminated by the surrounding forces." As he spoke, Xiaoyang appeared to be in low spirits. "Brother, I misspoke." "I'm sorry," Wild Leopard said apologetically when he saw that his brother was heartbroken. Who could remain indifferent to the pain of having one's tribe wiped out? If there was, it could only be because it was someone else's tribe that was wiped out, so it didn't matter. Xiaoyang shook his head and said, "It's over. I only hope that we can get a share of this opportunity. After our strength increases, we can kill our way back and restore our Black Tiger tribe's glory." Princess Mingzhu sat at the side and appeared to be in low spirits. However, she was extremely disdainful in her heart. The Black Tiger tribe's destruction was completely planned by Xiaoyang alone. Now he was still pretending to be heartbroken. He was really good at acting. Wild Leopard walked over and placed his hand on Xiaoyang's shoulder. "Brother, this time we'll share the riches and honor. If we succeed, we'll go with you and let those rascals pay with their blood." The current mad leopard looked even more lofty and lofty. "If it doesn't work, I'll invite the 2 of you to my tribe to recuperate. Although my tribe isn't as powerful as the Black Tiger tribe, it's still a good place to stay. Don't worry, we'll be on equal footing." "There's no need to be so particular," Wild Leopard said. In Wild Leopard's opinion, if he could invite the 2 of them back, it would greatly increase the strength of his tribe. As long as they didn't interfere with the tribe's affairs, they could have as high a status as they wanted. These didn't exist any problems. Moreover, since the Black Tiger tribe was already destroyed, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe the 2 of them as stray dogs. However, there was no need to doubt their strength. If he could take them in for his own use, they naturally wouldn't be bad. Xiaoyang shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kind intentions, brother. However, the 2 of us don't have such thoughts now. When we take revenge in the future, don't worry, brother. We'll definitely lend you a hand." Wild Leopard smiled and nodded. He also felt a little regretful in his heart. However, it was fine as long as he could make 2 friends today. After all, many things couldn't be forced. Moreover, sometimes if one's attitude was too tough, one might end up doing bad things with good intentions. In that case, it wouldn't be worth it. Looking at the 2 of them who were in low spirits, Wild Leopard sighed helplessly. The myriad beast world had always been like this. The weak were prey to the strong. Even the lower 3 tribes of the 10 great tribes couldn't escape from such a fate. Who would have thought that the lower 3 tribes, which were admired by countless tribes back then, would collapse like a building in an instant and disappear without a trace? Seeing that Wild Leopard didn't suspect anything, Xiaoyang secretly sighed in relief. However, this guy's brain was indeed not very good. He had a rough personality. Suddenly, The three of them looked up at the same time because they saw a flame streaking across the night sky quickly. Then a few extremely overbearing auras rushed over, pressuring Wild Leopard to the point that he almost couldn't breathe and almost suffocated. Such a huge change could be said to have happened all of a sudden, causing them to feel extremely uncomfortable. Chapter 2504. The chase in the sky completely broke the tranquility of the night sky. Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu watched cautiously, although this disaster obviously wouldn't fall on them. As outsiders, they still had their own worries and fears. Moreover, if some of the forces were to start a war, then many people here would be implicated. At that time, once chaos broke out, there might be even more unforeseen events. Sometimes, in order to protect themselves, they might even display strength that didn't belong to a second-level martial emperor. That was possible. Therefore, they still subconsciously wanted to leave this place. Although Wild Leopard was miserably suppressed by these tyrannical auras, his eyes were filled with anticipation, because, in his opinion, this was an extremely good opportunity to observe. After all, when these powerhouses fought, many things would be revealed every time they fought. If he could learn more, he would benefit greatly. The man who was burning with flames suddenly stopped right above their heads because a white-clothed man had appeared in the path he was rushing towards. After his path of retreat was cut off, it would be very difficult to escape again. Looking at the person with flames, it was obvious that he was extremely afraid of the other party, so he didn't dare to act rashly. In the blink of an eye, that person was surrounded by 3 people. Among the 3 people, Xiaoyang recognized 2 of them. They were the chief of the Blazing Flame tribe, Zhu Hong, and the chief of the Confusion tribe, Shi Yinfeng. As for the white-clothed young man, he didn't recognize him because there was no information about him in the information he collected. I didn't expect 3 5th-level powerhouses. Just how powerful is the Yin Flame tribe's powerhouse that was surrounded? Wild Leopard couldn't help but gasp when he saw the situation. With such a huge lineup, it could be seen how powerful that person was. Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu were already thinking of retreating in their hearts. After all, the battle between the 4 powerhouses wouldn't be simple. Even if one side suppressed the other and won, it was inevitable that some unforeseen events would occur. A gentleman wouldn't stand under a collapsing wall. However, if they were to run now, it would be very abrupt. Therefore, they were still waiting and didn't dare to act rashly. Looking at Wild Leopard again, he didn't seem to realize that danger was approaching. He even thought that this was an opportunity for him to observe the battle and learn something. He didn't seem to care about certain things at all and appeared to be very casual. At this moment, Xiaoyang felt somewhat helpless in his heart. This guy really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Brother, let's leave this place as soon as possible. Otherwise, if they start fighting, the shock waves from the battle might accidentally injure us, Xiaoyang said. Wild Leopard frowned when he heard this. Clearly, he was reluctant to give up such a great opportunity. However, after thinking about it carefully, this was indeed the case. All right, let's go further and look. Wild Leopard struggled to get up and left reluctantly. Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu also pretended to be very uncomfortable and followed behind Wild Leopard. Since this place had become a place of trouble, it was only natural for them to stay away from it. As for why those fellows in the sky were fighting, Xiaoyang didn't care. After all, no matter how much trouble they caused, as long as it didn't affect him, it was a good thing. Some dangers, if they could avoid them, they would naturally avoid them. With less trouble, it would be much quieter and safer. Once they left, they ran more than 10 miles away. Emo Luo, confess your accomplice, and we can give you a quick death. Zhu Hong gritted his teeth and berated. When Zhu Hong, He Kuei, and the rest figured out the general situation of this matter, it was naturally clear where they should point the spearhead at. It was just that they didn't expect that in these few days of investigation, they really found Yin Flame World Powerhouse. This person was also considered a top-notch figure in the Yin Flame world. Furthermore, his words were enough to make the entire world tremble. In terms of strength, he was ranked in the top 10. What was even more hateful was that this person actually used some means to infiltrate their blazing flame tribe. This made Zhu Hong even more furious. This way, there was immediately a conclusion as to how his son died. Since Mo Luo could infiltrate the main sect silently, then even if he used some means to enter the branch and carry out an assassination, that was also possible. Rank 5 strength tyrannical means, all these keywords combined, it could be said that all the spearhead pointed at Mo Luo. Although the Xiaoyang standing in the distance did not hear very clearly, he was already secretly delighted in his heart. Originally, he was still worried about being found out. To think that a scapegoat appeared. Mo Luo was also complaining incessantly in his heart right now. He heard that there was a great opportunity appearing in the myriad beast realm. Originally, he wanted to seize the opportunity to make a fortune. But who would have thought that he was inexplicably pinned with a crime? I didn't kill your son. Whether or not someone deliberately framed me, that's hard to say, Mo Luo said with a cold smile. According to the information Mo Luo obtained, Zhu Lubin died under the black poison spike. What did it have to do with him? Right now, Mo Luo was also very displeased in his heart. He didn't get any benefits at all, but now he was intercepted and surrounded by their powerhouses. It was really going for wool and coming home shorn. Shi Yunfeng didn't say a word. Although some things were explained clearly, their Mika tribe was still suspicious. Therefore, not speaking at this time was the wisest choice. If he opened his mouth and said something wrong, he was afraid that this matter would become even more confusing. With the brains of your Yin Flame world, there's no way you could come up with such a scheme. You even wanted to create the illusion of the sword mark. So, you must have teamed up with the cultivators of the Four Realm Alliance to cover it up, Xing Tian said coldly. Hearing these inexplicable words, Mo Luo felt very irritated. These fellows were really able to come up with such nonsensical things as they opened their mouths. Of course, Mo Luo also knew that they would not say something that was not true. Therefore, there must be some unforeseen circumstances and clues. But what exactly was wrong he couldn't pinpoint. Looks like you're determined to make me the scapegoat, Mo Luo said coldly. To Mo Luo, it was practically impossible for him to leave this place. Even if he did not kill Zhu Lubin, he was still a cultivator of the Yin Flame world. He was an enemy to begin with. How could he be kind? A bunch of idiots. You've been played in circles by others, and you still think you're so smart, Mo Luo said with some exasperation. Standing in the distance, Xiaoyang heard these words and felt very helpless inside. He originally thought that the unlucky guy from the Yin Flame world would be the perfect scapegoat. Now, it seemed that was not the case. Chapter 2505. However, with this guy from the Yin Flame world causing such a ruckus, the other tribe's attention would probably be drawn over. At least during this period of time, Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu did not need to worry too much. They only needed to watch the show. Wild Leopard was clearly very agitated and also a little furious. He never would have thought that the cultivators from the Yin Flame world would be so bold as to attack their myriad beast realm. They were basically ignoring the many powerhouses of the myriad beast realm. Of course, Wild Leopard also knew that since that reckless guy was already surrounded, it would naturally be difficult for him to continue living here. Mo Luo was also extremely uneasy right now. At the same time, his gaze constantly wandered around. He also knew that he was currently surrounded by 3 powerhouses of the same level as him. There might even be more powerhouses coming. It would be extremely difficult for him to escape today. In fact, it could even be said to be an impossible thing. He originally wanted to try his luck here and see if he could obtain some fortuitous encounters to break through his shackles. Then he would cause havoc in the Myriad Beast Realm and cooperate with a local attack to chase the Myriad Beast Realm army out of his world. However, he never thought that he would be exposed so quickly. At the same time, Mo Luo was extremely furious. If he died here today, everything would be for naught. He had cultivated to this level with great difficulty. How could he lose his life just like that. However, this was like a dead end. It was almost impossible for him to escape from it. Xingtian continued to watch calmly. He was not in a hurry to make a move because he wanted to wait for Emo Luo's companions to appear. After all, his companions were basically in a dead end. They would definitely think of a way to save them. Moreover, Emo Luo's cultivation was high, but his brain was probably not that good. As for scheming, he was even more sluggish. Instead, it was the person behind all of this that was the most terrifying. Even if they killed Emo Luo today, there might be other powerhouses from the Inflame world joining the fray. When that time came, this kind of disease would probably be a huge headache for them. The scheme was so vicious that it was impossible to guard against it. Since the other side had purposely tried to make the entire southeast fall into chaos and almost caused a war between the Scorching Flame tribe and the Confusion tribe, they could do the same in another place. If the Wanshou realm was fighting because of a local conflict, they wouldn't think much of it. It was just the law of the jungle. If it was an internal conflict caused by an outsider's interference, then the meaning would be somewhat different. Emo Luo, you'd best tell me where your accomplice is. Otherwise, I'll make you suffer for the rest of your life. I'm sure you've heard of the methods of my Mitzi tribe. Shi Yinfeng sneered. Now, apart from Zhu Hong, the other two were relatively calm. Moreover, they were also looking further ahead. Since they had found clues this time, they naturally had to uproot it. At that moment, Emo Luo felt an unspeakable bitterness in his heart. With such a big pot of shit on his head, it could be said that he couldn't wash it clean. Emo Luo also knew that the poison used by the Mi Jie tribe was indeed terrifying. If he was caught, he might even become a test subject and suffer endless torture. Thinking about these problems, Emo Luo felt even more sorrowful. What was going on? They really went for wool and came home shorn. I said, I don't have any accomplices. Of course, seeing you guys like this, I feel happy. So what if I die here today? You have never been able to find the person behind all this. Emo Luo laughed out loud as he spoke. This was also Emo Luo's consolation. Even if he died, the Wanshou realm still wouldn't be peaceful. It was a pity that this news couldn't be sent back. Otherwise, it would be enough for the Inflame realm to fight to the death with the Wanshou realm army. Zhu Hong had been holding back the anger in his heart. However, Emo Luo was extremely uncooperative, which made him even more displeased. He even wanted to attack and kill him directly. Xingtian seemed to have felt the subtle change as well. He immediately roared and attacked in an instant, pouncing towards Emo Luo. If they continued to waste time, it would only make Zhu Hong's mood worse. When a person does something in a state of extreme anger, the consequences are unpredictable. Therefore, it wouldn't be a bad idea to capture him first and torture him later. When Shi Yinfeng saw Xingtian make a move, he immediately went to block his opponent's path of retreat to prevent him from escaping. After all, they were both in the 5th level of the Martial King realm. Everyone knew how powerful they were. When they were determined to escape, they could think of ways to erupt with an extremely terrifying ability to survive. Therefore, the more it was like this, the more they couldn't be careless. Emo Luo saw that Shi Yinfeng was no longer talking, so his first thought was to escape. However, when he realized that Shi Yinfeng didn't attack, he felt helpless. The opponent's attitude was obviously like a hunter. No matter how many thoughts you had under these circumstances, they would cut off all paths of survival. Therefore, Emo Luo didn't think too much. Since they were already at this stage, there was only one path left to choose, and that was to fight to the death. Only by making the opponent feel threatened and panicking would he have a chance to kill his way out. If he continued to be timid, then he would be courting death. At that moment, flames began to burn around Emo Luo's body. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a man on fire. However, no one could feel any heat from him. Instead, a cold wind blew, and the atmosphere turned eerie. The flames were eerie green. In the night sky, they looked like will-o'-the-wisps. This was the first time Xiaoyang and the others saw the true appearance of an almighty from the Inflame world. They were more or less shocked. They were already 10 miles away, but they still felt extremely cold, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Among them, it was more of a psychological effect. It made people feel depressed and uncomfortable. Beside them, the wild leopard was affected as well. His emotions began to become unstable, and he even looked sentimental. However, more than that, he felt wronged. It was as if he had thought of too many unpleasant things and wanted to release all of them. Chapter 2506. It was surprising that the cultivators of the Inflame world had such abilities. Just the release of their aura was enough to affect others' emotions and mentality. Seeing how Kuang Bao was losing control, Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu did not dare to help out recklessly. After all, if they did anything, it would raise suspicions. In the night sky, a ball of eerie fire was darting around. It seemed random, but its attacks were fierce. Emo Luo knew that he was in a place of certain death, so he did not care at all. He used everything he had. All he wanted was a life and death struggle. If he was lucky and the fish didn't die but the net was broken, wouldn't he have a chance to escape? At the very least, that was a sliver of hope. He could not miss it no matter what. Thinking about that, Emo Luo unleashed all of his battle prowess. It was even a little extraordinary. This gave Xing Tian a headache. He did not reveal his true form, but it was still a headache for him to deal with. The shock waves from the battle swept out continuously. Within a radius, everything was flattened. Not a single blade of grass was left alive. They were all powerhouses of the 5th level. Though there was a slight difference in strength, when a person was in a desperate situation and fought like a trapped beast, the strength and explosiveness they displayed could not be ignored. Right now, Kuang Bao could not take the pressure anymore. He revealed his true form and lunged at the ball of fire like a madman. Xiao Yang did not stop him. If he did, he would expose himself. Since Kuang Bao could not suppress his emotions, he had to take responsibility for everything he did. Even if he had to pay with his life, it was his own choice. In other words, Kuang Bao was completely out of breath because of the pressure. That was why he collapsed and charged forward like a moth to a flame. However, Kuang Bao's ending was obvious. Before he could even join the battle, he was heavily injured by the shock waves. He fell to the ground, dying. The battle was still going on, and the aftershocks were getting stronger and stronger. Therefore, if he wanted to survive, it would be impossible for him to do so without help. Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu glanced at each other and could only sigh helplessly. The battle in the sky was also very intense and anxious. Between the attacks, there were victories and defeats for both sides. However, that small exchange was unable to truly determine the outcome of the battle. Even though on the surface, Emo Luo was already in a situation of certain death, who could guarantee that nothing unexpected would happen? Zhu Hong frowned when he saw the creatures around him begin to change due to the influence of the battle. With a roar, a wave of heat swept out. The gloomy feeling from before was also beginning to disappear as the heat wave swept through. However, the battle and struggle between the two auras was also incomparably tragic. It was as if it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. Then, Zhu Hong directly joined the battle. Since Xing Tian was unable to take Emo Luo down alone, they would fight him 2 against 1. That way, there was no need to be afraid of Emo Luo, no matter how powerful he was. He would still be defeated. With Zhu Hong's participation, the situation immediately changed drastically. The intense battle that had been evenly matched had truly become a battle between trapped beasts. Looking at the intense battle, Xiao Yang's brows furrowed together. He looked around. When he discovered that there was no one else around, he began to have some thoughts of his own. What? You want help that cultivator from the Inflame world? Princess Mingzhu asked softly. It was extremely unwise to do so because, once they took action, there was a risk of being exposed. The risk was extremely high as well. However, if they could save Emo Luo, they would have a better bridge to their alliance with the Inflame world. As a matter of fact, if even more powerful cultivators from the Inflame world were to join forces, it would truly be a headache for the myriad beast world. High risks were often accompanied by great rewards. Xiao Yang nodded his head solemnly. He was indeed thinking about this problem. The other party's attention was completely drawn to Mo Luo. If they launched a sneak attack from the shadows, they might be able to establish another miracle. At the very least, they could weaken the other party's strength. However, it was truly impossible to do all of this without exposing themselves. Therefore, he had to think about his next move carefully. He could not afford to make any mistakes. The more he thought about these problems, the more Xiao Yang felt his head hurt. If this continued, it would not be a good idea. If you want to do it, then do it. Why should a real man be afraid of everything? Princess Mingzhu suddenly smiled calmly. After entering the myriad beast world, they had been working in the shadows. This made Princess Mingzhu feel extremely aggrieved. Although she had an excuse to convince herself, she still felt uncomfortable in her heart. If they could fight head-on, who would be willing to do such a despicable act? After receiving Princess Mingzhu's reply, Xiao Yang immediately made a decision. His gaze swept above for a moment and quickly locked onto his target. Although Princess Mingzhu had already expressed her willingness to face everything head-on with him, he could not be willful. At the very least, before obtaining the opportunity, he had to keep a low profile as much as possible. He would hide for as long as he could. This was also Xiao Yang's attitude. After all, there were many hidden talents in the central region. If the other party really wanted to find them, they would probably run into a wall everywhere. It would be difficult for them to take even a single step. Very quickly, Xiao Yang found an excellent location and went over with Princess Mingzhu. Princess Mingzhu carefully set up a seal, while Xiao Yang was looking for an opportunity to attack. Mo Luo was surrounded by two powerhouses of the same level. No matter how valiant he was, he still seemed to be lacking in strength. Xiao Yang saw all of this. If this dragged on, Mo Luo would probably not be able to escape alive. He had to act quickly. Then, Xiao Yang took out a poisonous stinger. This was the stinger of a level 4 powerhouse. The poison it contained was not to be underestimated. If he could kill it in one hit, even a level 5 powerhouse like King Wu would have a headache. If he could not suppress it in time, he would probably be severely injured. Xiao Yang's gaze was locked onto the battlefield. As long as an opportunity presented itself, he would attack. Black Stinger. Chapter 2507. The black stinger was not very obvious in the night. Although there were some faint sounds of it tearing through the air, it was difficult to detect due to the intense battle. After Xiao Yang tossed out the stinger, he did not even look at it. He immediately signaled for the princess to leave with him and go somewhere else. Since it was a sneak attack, it obviously had to be done very cleverly. Moreover, they didn't want to be exposed, so they needed to leave this place directly so that they wouldn't be traced and discovered. Otherwise, if they waited here, they would probably be exposed next. As a result, leaving right now was the wisest thing to do. As for whether Mo Luo could find a chance to survive under such a barrage of attacks, that would depend on his own abilities. If he could not carve out a path of blood even after going so far, it would be quite frustrating. Amidst the intense battle, no one noticed that a stinger was secretly approaching them. It was like a venomous snake, silent and undetectable. Shi Yinfeng had been observing Mo Luo the entire time. He had sealed off all of his escape routes so that he could not leave this place alive. However, all of a sudden, he sensed an extremely familiar aura. He was rather perplexed. What was going on? The aura was extremely familiar. It even made him rather excited. All of a sudden, Shi Yinfeng was greatly shocked. This was because he remembered where the aura had come from and how terrifying it was. "Be careful!" Shi Yinfeng called out. Xing Tian and Zhu Hong were both stunned. They did not understand what Shi Yinfeng meant. However, in the next moment, Zhu Hong frowned. This was because a stinger had silently pierced his chest. Zhu Hong could not help but frown when he saw the pitch-black stinger. He had never thought that someone would actually launch a sneak attack from the shadows. That was indeed the case. Their previous discussion was that the other party was working together to cause trouble. Even though they had managed to ferret out Emoluo, his accomplice had always been in the shadows. They had always been on guard, but the other party had not used any strength. Instead, he had used the purest of his strength to launch such a killing move. As such, it was impossible to defend against. In an instant, the poison in the stinger spread rapidly, causing Zhu Hong's mind to become somewhat dazed and her body to become somewhat numb. The tail needle was the life essence of all the cultivators of the scorpion tribe. The poison it contained was incomparably terrifying. Xiao Yang, who had retreated far away, smiled when he saw that his attack was sure to hit the target, although it was impossible for this poisonous thorn to take Zhu Hong's life. However, his strength would definitely be greatly affected because of this. If Shi Yunfeng wasn't present, Xiao Yang would have used more tricks to kill this fifth-order martial king without knowing how he died. However, Shi Yunfeng was an expert in using poison, so he naturally knew how to detoxify the poison. Therefore, there were many possibilities, and there was no need to take more risks. It was enough to change the situation of the battle. If he wanted more, he would have to pay a higher price in the end. Therefore, it was better to be calm when doing anything. Princess Mingzhu, on the other hand, remained silent. She was extremely impressed with Xiaoyang. This guy was really too scary. He had made some arrangements without anyone noticing, making it even harder for people to guard against, especially when it came to hiding himself. He had done a great job. She even suspected that if he had not taken the initiative to expose himself, it would have been difficult for the people from the myriad beast realm to find him, given their abilities. At this moment, Emoluo was overjoyed when he saw that his attack had stopped, because he felt that this matter could be settled. As expected, there was a change and he had a chance to live. Immediately after, Emoluo charged towards Zhu Hong. Since he appeared to be very weak, it was naturally the best choice to use him as the breakthrough point. Seeing this, Xing Tian roared. He immediately turned into a dragon and charged at Emo Lao. Without Zhu Lubin, the scorpion tribe was greatly affected. If Zhu Hong were to fall here today, perhaps the entire tribe would be shaken. At that time, it would be difficult for all of them to escape the responsibility. Emo Luo saw that his opponent had fallen for his trick, so he immediately changed his direction and charged towards another direction. What he did before was merely a feint to draw Xing Tian's attention and make it hard for him to change his path. "Where do you think you're going?" Shi Yunfeng roared and slapped. Shi Yunfeng hadn't made a move because he wanted to cut off Emo Luo's last path of retreat. Even if there was a change, he couldn't change his role in it. Bang! There was a muffled sound. Because Emo Luo was running for his life, he forgot about Shi Yunfeng. This was what it meant to attend to one thing and lose sight of another. Sometimes, when you see something and you are in a hurry to get it, you will overlook something. Even though he was hit, Emo Luo didn't stop. He continued to run. Under these circumstances, Emo Luo knew very well that even though the three of them were at a disadvantage, he had no advantage. Plus, after something happened here, the powerhouses from other places would quickly come to his aid. Therefore, when that time came, it would truly be an inescapable net, and it would be impossible to escape. When Xiaoyang saw that Emo Luo had successfully escaped, he heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as he could escape. Whether he could survive or not would depend on his own abilities. After all, there was only so much he could do. As for the follow-up, he would have to wait until the night was over. After all, if he were to cause trouble at this juncture, he would be digging his own grave. Seeing that the battle had been settled, Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu continued to move forward. They had to get away from this troublesome place. The elites of the upper three tribes would probably appear and investigate this place continuously, looking for clues. Shi Yunfeng, I'll go after him. You look after tribe leader Zhu. As soon as Xing Tian finished speaking, he chased after Emo Luo in his original form. Shi Yunfeng immediately stopped when he heard this. He also understood that no one was better at using poison than him. For the same reason, other than using poison, he was still much weaker than them in terms of combat strength. Moreover, Emo Luo had been severely injured in the previous battle and had even been struck by his poisonous palm. Therefore, it was naturally a simple matter for Xing Tian to chase after Emo Luo. Zhu Hong glared angrily. He was looking at Shi Yunfeng. Chapter 2508. As Zhu Hong was ambushed and heavily injured, and Emo Luo managed to escape, the news spread like wildfire due to the large number of spectators. As a result, the entire God Disaster Mountain range was in an uproar. The Scorching Flame tribe became even more furious because of this. They even swore to catch the clown who was behind all this. Due to the many changes, the entire God Disaster Mountain range was once again shrouded in suspicion. Many people were looking forward to seeing what would happen next. The night was destined to not be peaceful. Regardless of whether it was the upper 3 tribes or the middle 3 tribes, they were all elites. They patrolled the entire God Disaster Mountain range in an attempt to find all the poisonous thorns. However, after working for an entire night, they were unable to obtain any results. That was because the person who ambushed them seemed to come and go like a ghost. It was not an easy task to find them. At that moment, there were quite a few discussions. As for the person who ambushed them, there were many different opinions. Everyone had their own opinions, and it caused quite an uproar. Of course, there were quite a few people who were prepared to watch the show. After all, the target was the Scorching Flame tribe, not them. As such, they could ignore the matter as if it did not concern them. Perhaps the upper 3 tribes would be in a terrible fix because of this, and the powerhouses of the tribes would have more opportunities to search for their own fortunes in the tomb. There were just too many powerhouses in the upper 3 tribes and the middle 3 tribes. If all of them entered the tomb, they probably would not even be able to obtain much leftovers, let alone a share of the loot. The more chaotic the situation was, the more advantageous it would be for them. Once the opportunity came, no one would be able to stop it. If everything remained the same, then the opportunities they obtained would naturally be the same as well. Who would not want to obtain a great fortune? Although it was said that only the virtuous could live in the world, these words were easy to say. However, it was not an easy task to accomplish them. Everyone knew that if they did not have the strength to fight for it, they probably would not be able to catch it even if it ended up in their hands. As a result, there needed to be some changes. Through these changes, he would be able to give himself a chance. With the help of Shi Yunfeng, Zhu Hong had already returned to Mount Tianhua. Although the poison had been completely suppressed, he was still in great pain. This is Xie Jun's stinger from the Scorpion tribe. Shi Yunfeng frowned as he looked at the stinger in his hand. Before this, Shi Yunfeng had always been curious as to why the other party had taken out the tail needle. Although the stingers could be refined into magic tools, if one was skilled enough, they could become great killing weapons. But at the same time, there was another threat, and that was that while it could kill people, it could also accidentally injure oneself. Therefore, if one wanted to control it, it was a very risky thing to do. However, the other party insisted on doing so. Unexpectedly, it was to set up an even bigger trap. If it weren't for the special situation now, his plan would have succeeded, and the 2 tribes would be locked in a fierce battle. Under such circumstances, there would only be one result, and that was to allow more forces to join in, causing the entire Wanshou realm to fall into chaos. Zhu Hong's face was very gloomy. At the same time, she felt very sullen in her heart. To think that he had been in power for tens of thousands of years, but during this period of time, he had encountered so many inexplicable things. Even now, he still didn't know who his opponent was. This was the most sullen part. If he knew where his opponent was, he could still fight with him and defeat him in a face-to-face battle. However, he was constantly on guard, and this was also the most unbearable part for him. There was a lot of anger in his heart, but he could only continue to hold it in. He took a total of 3 stingers, so he only has Xia Lingsui's and my senior's stingers left. In the future, we have to be more careful. My senior's stinger is the real killer move. As Shi Yunfeng spoke, he couldn't help but gasp. All the poison of a 5th-order martial emperor was concentrated on the stinger, so it was easy to imagine how terrifying the power of the stinger was. Zhu Hong's face became even gloomier. In the following period of time, he might have to continue to deal with the mysterious person's sneak attack. Moreover, such an attack could be said to be impossible to guard against. Shi Yunfeng's mind was also rapidly thinking. He recalled the information he saw in the ruins and wanted to find some clues, but he still couldn't be sure. Thinking about this, Shi Yunfeng became more and more irritated. If this continued, even a master of poison like him would have to be on guard at all times. Otherwise, he might lose his life at any time. If that was the case, things wouldn't be good. Clan leader Zhu, please don't get angry easily these days. Otherwise, the poison that you've suppressed with great difficulty will relapse. Rest well these days and leave the rest to us. Shi Yunfeng sighed. Zhu Hong still didn't say a word. He was incomparably furious now. However, he couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, he could only use this method to suppress his emotions. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop once he opened his mouth. Shi Yunfeng was still studying the stinger. He hoped to find some clues from it. However, the result made him very helpless and disappointed because it was too clean. There was almost no aura left behind. The current situation was still the same. There were no flaws, so they couldn't find any place to attack. Although they had discussed a general direction, some of the details were still difficult to determine, let alone find the other party. I wonder what kind of person could do things like this. Shi Yunfeng muttered and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Back when he was fighting in the In-Flame World battlefield, he didn't encounter such a sullen situation. Most importantly, it was still troublesome. If it was a face-to-face battle, they naturally wouldn't mind. They even felt that there was no problem. However, they kept thinking about whether or not they would be ambushed. This was very difficult. However, before the other party surfaced, they could only continue to be on guard. They didn't dare to be careless. The current situation was becoming more and more unclear. They had so many masters, but they were actually played in circles. This was simply a great humiliation. Not long after, Xing Tian returned. His expression wasn't good. Chapter 2509. Zhu Hong knew what was going on when she saw how ugly Xing Tian's expression was. She could not help but sigh helplessly. Although Xing Tian had yet to say anything, she was well aware of the outcome. If he went to hunt down Mo Luo, he would probably fail in the end. Otherwise, how could he have done something like this with his temperament? Shi Yunfeng also shook his head helplessly. He never thought that they would still fail even when the 3 of them worked together. The more Shi Yunfeng thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. He was even curious as to what kind of person could have such tyrannical control over his body to be able to escape from such a place. Did you find any clues, or did you see the contact? Shi Yunfeng asked in a deep voice. Xing Tian shook his head helplessly. Mo Luo fled like a madman. I couldn't catch up to him at all. As a result, there's no need to mention the person who acted in secret appearing again. Zhu Hong's emotions became rather unstable when she heard that. She really found it rather difficult to accept an outcome like this. At the very least, she was extremely uncomfortable right now. However, so what if she was unhappy? The outcome was already set in stone. If it weren't for the fact that the cave was about to open and most of the experts were focused on it, Mo Luo would not have been able to escape even if he had reinforcements. Although Xing Tian seemed powerful and had a great reputation, she never expected him to be a coward. He was afraid of being ambushed, so he did not dare to chase after Mo Luo. Zhu Hong felt more and more vexed when she thought of this. However, Shi Yunfeng discovered that something was off. Although Xing Tian's expression was ugly and rather gloomy, there was a different light flowing through his eyes. Since Xing Tian was unwilling to speak, Xi Feng naturally could not ask. As a member of the mysterious dragon tribe, Xing Tian was renowned. He was not simple either. With his abilities, it would naturally not be too much of a problem for him to catch up to the heavily injured Emo Luo. However, he had returned empty-handed and was so calm. This was enough to explain many things. It was likely that there was something fishy going on, but no one knew exactly what was going on. Forget it. Let's put this matter aside for the time being. After the tomb opens and we obtain the opportunity inside, we will properly settle the score with these two worlds. Zhu Hong sighed helplessly and said resentfully. Zhu Hong also did not expect that things would develop to this extent. However, since things had already come to this, there was no other way. He would settle the score with them when he was free. Moreover, Zhu Hong's current state was not very optimistic. Even though the poison had been suppressed, it was still difficult for her to use her full strength. Otherwise, once the poison broke out, he would have to pay a heavy price. Xing Tian, on the other hand, remained silent. His gaze had also become somewhat erratic. It was clear that his thoughts were no longer here. After Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu escaped, they once again blended perfectly into the God Tribulation mountain range. No matter how those elite warriors from the few clans searched and interrogated, they were able to cover it up with the most perfect words. After staying in the myriad beast realm for so long, they naturally understood the nature of the cultivators in this world. Therefore, as long as they paid attention to one thing and did not appear to be too deliberate, it was still very easy to get away with it. After all, there were too many cultivators in the God Tribulation mountain range now, who could understand the temperament of all the clans and find clues from them. If they wanted to thoroughly investigate everyone, it would be an extremely huge project. How could they not let go of every clue? It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It was difficult to achieve. Even if one had the ability to stir up stormy waves, it would still be difficult to find. On the contrary, Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu were still ordinary martial emperors who came to look for opportunities. As long as they did not deliberately leak their auras or reveal any flaws, they were probably similar to those cultivators from the myriad beast realm. It was simply impossible to find them. Why didn't you just kill Zhu Hong directly? Princess Mingzhu frowned and asked softly. Zhu Hong was a 5th-level martial emperor almighty, and his identity was the chief of the Scorching Flame tribe. If he could be killed, then the Scorching Flame tribe would definitely fall into a certain degree of chaos. Moreover, in the future, the Four-Realm Alliance would have one less strong opponent. Moreover, Princess Mingzhu believed that with Xiao Yang's current ability, it was still possible for him to launch a sneak attack and kill with all his strength. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, could only smile bitterly. This princess really thought that things were simple. If everything could be solved by fighting and killing, then how could there be so many problems? If I kill Zhu Hong, then we will definitely be exposed. At that time, I'm afraid that the other two will not care about Emo Luo and will attack us. With the current situation in the God Tribulation mountain range, if Zhu Hong dies, the entire myriad beast realm will be shaken. Can you and I still escape? Xiao Yang explained helplessly. Such a simple logic. Why did they overlook it? Because they were too utilitarian. Moreover, they were here to stir up a storm this time, so that the myriad beast realm would be exhausted and would not have the spare energy to attack the Four-Realm Alliance. That was their goal, and they didn't just come here to die. Hearing this, Princess Mingzhu remained silent. This idea was indeed a little rushed. In her opinion, if they could kill one more expert, then they would have one less expert to face in the future. As for the escape method, it was not impossible for them to achieve it with their current abilities. Therefore, this was still something they could try. Moreover, since they dared to invade the myriad beast realm, how could they not have some tricks up their sleeves? If they came without a backup plan, they would only be asking for trouble. However, Xiaoyang was thinking further ahead because there were some methods that could not be used until the very end. The longer they could stay in the myriad beast realm, the greater their contribution would be. If they stood their ground early, the effect would not be too good. The two did not dwell on this topic. Since it was a foregone conclusion, there was no need to argue about it. To them now, the opportunity in the tomb below was the most important. If they could gain some benefits from it, they might be able to do more. 2 days later, the noisy God Tribulation Mountain range quieted down again. However, there was also a new piece of news. Mo Luo was severely injured and the poison was difficult to cure. In a fit of anger, he vented his anger on a tribe and caused a ruckus in the central region. Chapter 2510. After receiving the news, Xiaoyang's thoughts changed. Right now, Mo Luo was like a cornered beast putting up a desperate fight. He had already been injured in the previous battle, and he had also been struck by Shi Yunfeng's poisonous palm. His current situation was probably very bad, and he might even be putting up a final struggle. Next, he would probably take revenge crazily and attack the weak tribes in the central region. After all, he knew that he was in a dead end. He would lose control of his emotions. Therefore, Xiaoyang was wondering if he should help Mo Luo. If he could save Mo Luo, there would be a bridge between them and the Inflame world. Then, it wouldn't be so sudden to talk about teaming up against the Wanshou world. But for now, Xiaoyang still had some scruples in his heart. After all, with Mo Luo's ability, if he continued to stir up a storm of blood, the powerhouses wouldn't turn a blind eye to it. Even though the fortune in the tomb was extremely important, if they allowed Mo Luo to wreak havoc, they would probably suffer a lot of criticism. It could even be said that Mo Luo's actions were a slap to their faces. Thus, under such circumstances, no matter how one looked at it, saving Mo Luo would not be an easy task. He might even have to take the risk himself. No matter how he looked at it, he would be in danger. He might not even be able to extricate himself. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang's heart was more or less in pain. Although risks came with benefits, sometimes, once the consequences exceeded what he could bear, it wouldn't be worth it. He wasn't being selfish. It was just that, in his current state, he had to play it safe. Princess Mingzhu seemed to have seen through Xiaoyang's concerns, even though she was not very clear about some of the details. Although she wasn't clear about the details, she still understood the general situation. Since we have an idea, let's do it. After all, with just the two of us, it's really hard to fight against the Wanshou world. If there are experts from the Inflame world joining us, it'll be much easier for us, Princess Mingzhu sighed. Teaming up with the Inflame world to fight against the Wanshou world was a strategy that the Emperor God had decided on long ago. However, due to the lack of prerequisites, they hadn't been able to start it. Otherwise, why would they brace themselves to come to the Wanshou realm? What they were doing could be said to be the biggest risk. Although it seemed like everything was still under control on the surface, there was no telling when an accident might happen, or even the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiaoyang nodded his head solemnly. He was also somewhat helpless about this matter. Although he said that casually, he had a feeling that if they really went to save Mo Luo, they would probably have to pay a great price. However, if they missed this opportunity, then in the future, when they wanted to ally with the Inflame realm, it would be a little abrupt and stiff. And this time, it could be said to be a heaven-sent opportunity. If he could properly grasp it in his hands, he might be able to turn things around. Even in such a dangerous situation, he felt that he could give it a try. However, they had to find a way out first. Otherwise, they would really be in big trouble. Moreover, Princess Mingzhu also expressed her approval of this matter, so Xiaoyang naturally had to make a fuss about it. Mo Luo was indeed a very important person, and they still had to save him. Even if the Inflame realm's powerhouses wouldn't come for a while, with the addition of a Stage 5 powerhouse, their strength would still increase by a lot. After thinking everything through, Xiaoyang also indirectly asked for some information from the other cultivators. After combining it, he immediately set off for the place where Mo Luo last appeared. Although they knew that Luo couldn't stay in the same place forever, they could only act according to the information they had. If they could find some information, then they might be able to deduce some clues. Right now, in the entire God Tribulation Mountain range, many powerhouses were filled with anger. They hated Luo's actions even more. They all shouted louder than anyone else, but no one dared to stop him at all. Although the In-Flame Realm's cultivator was already heavily injured, he was still a stage 5 powerhouse. How could they easily look down on him? Everyone knew that all they could do was create momentum so that the large tribes couldn't withstand the pressure and send experts to kill him. In particular, the powerhouses in the central tribes were clamoring even louder. After all, who knew if Luo's brain wasn't working properly that day and their tribes would be destroyed? They naturally had to surround and kill such a dangerous person as soon as possible. On the third day, Luo slaughtered another small tribe and fled. The large tribes were completely unable to remain calm. They sent out several stage 5 powerhouses to hunt him down and kill this outsider who was causing trouble. Right now, Luo's condition was indeed very bad. However, if he started causing trouble, it would indeed be very troublesome. If they couldn't kill him, the consequences would be difficult to deal with. Even more tribes in the central region would be destroyed. It was also because of this that most of the tribes in the central region fell into a state of danger. Who knew when the calamity would come? How could they not be afraid? That was a stage 5 powerhouse. Even if he was a sick tiger, he was still much stronger than a group of sheep like them. After slaughtering a few tribes, Luo's strength was pretty much exhausted. Even maintaining flight seemed to be a bit strenuous for him. Moreover, the large tribes would probably send experts to hunt him down. His situation would probably become even worse. Walking in the forest, Luo felt very helpless. He never thought that after roaming the world for so long, he would be in such a predicament today. It was even difficult to turn the situation around. Could it be that he was really going to die here? Luo thought to himself and became much more sorrowful. He had cultivated for thousands of years and suffered countless hardships to obtain his current status. However, he had become a scapegoat and his life was hanging by a thread. At that moment, Luo was filled with grief and anger. It was also because he knew that it was difficult for him to continue living that he slaughtered those tribes to vent his anger. What he did was very extreme. It also showed just how terrible his current state of mind was. Suddenly, Luo saw a black-robed young man standing before him. He couldn't help but be shocked. Chapter 25:11. Luo stared at the man in black, and his heart skipped a beat. Although he was distracted by other things just now, the other party was able to block his path without making a sound. Then, just how terrifying was this person's cultivation? At least this method was extremely advanced and difficult for him to overlook. Occasionally, a cool breeze would blow through the forest, making one feel cold and bleak. Luo stopped his steps as well. He didn't dare to continue. After all, he wasn't sure if the man in black was a friend or foe. If he acted rashly, he would only be digging his own grave. Therefore, he wanted to observe for a while. If something went wrong, he would run away immediately. Though he knew it would be difficult for him to leave the realm of beasts alive, if he could drag a few more down with him, then why not? Though the possibility of that happening wasn't high, the anger in his heart made him want to try again. Nothing was certain in this world. Nobody could predict what would happen next. Therefore, Luo didn't dare to act recklessly. In fact, Luo wanted to sense the strength of the other party, but in the end he failed to do so. Fortunately, the black-robed man didn't reveal any obvious hostility, which made him feel much more at ease. However, under these unclear circumstances, the pressure that Luo felt was extremely great. "I wonder who you are." Luo thought about it for a while and asked. Since the opponent hadn't made a move for so long, then the hostility in his heart lessened a little. However, Luo didn't dare to be careless. His vigilance was on full display. He didn't want this to be a trap set by the opponent. If he was careless and got hit, then it would be too late for him to regret. At the same time, he was waiting for that sliver of hope to appear. As long as there was a sliver of hope, then he had to try. As long as he wasn't dead, then there was hope to live. The man in black turned around and saw an extremely normal face. It was the kind of face that could be seen anywhere in the realm of beasts. Luo's mind was very active. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but wonder where he had seen this person before. However, he really couldn't remember. "All you need to know is that I am your friend," the black-robed man said with a smile. Hearing these words, Luo frowned slightly. He was a little confused. What friends did he have in the Wanshou realm? "Now, I think I'm the only one who can save you," said the black-robed man. In an instant, Luo's expression became extraordinarily excited. Ever since he was struck by Shi Yunfeng's poisonous palm, he had been tormented. Adding on the fact that he was heavily injured, it was difficult for him to suppress it. So he was now in a state of waiting for death. But now there was a glimmer of hope. How could Luo not be excited and expectant? The slim chance of survival that he had been searching for all this time seemed to have appeared now. Thinking of this, Luo became even more excited. "Could it be that you're a friend of the Four Realms Alliance?" Suddenly, Luo raised his eyebrows and smiled. The black-robed man was stunned for a moment. Then he nodded to dispel his doubts. Xiaoyang had arrived a long time ago, and he had also discovered a pattern from Malayo's trajectory, which was why he had been waiting for him here. Who would have thought that it would be as he had expected? Receiving such an answer, Luo was extremely excited. Looks like it was not time for him to die. But in the next moment he was extremely shocked. This black-robed man who he could not see through was truly terrifying. It was as if everything was within his control. There was no mistake at all. Speaking of which, if he did not have an extremely good brain, how could a newly ascended small world stop the White Bear tribe's attack and even actively invade the Wanshou realm and stir up a storm? The chaos in the southeast was enough to explain many problems. Even the Blazing tribe and the Confusion tribe had almost started a war. In an instant, Luo felt much more relaxed. He quickly walked over. As he walked, Luo studied the black-robed man carefully, trying to find out more information. However, because of the black robe, he could not see through him. Furthermore, the other person's emotions were even more calm, giving off an unfathomable feeling. Perhaps there was no need to think so much right now. How to survive was the most important thing. Thinking like this, the pressure in Luo's heart lessened. He no longer felt so terrible. When Luo walked closer, Xiaoyang threw out a bottle of Dan. "If you are brave enough, eat it." Taking the Dan, Luo's brows were tightly locked together, because he did not know what was in the bottle. Should he eat it or not? Plus, this was the first time they had met. Did he have to trust him completely with just a few words? In the end, Luo swallowed all the Dan without hesitation. Then he sat down with his legs crossed and began to meditate. No matter how much he was worried, Luo had no other choice. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well take a gamble. Who knows, he might even succeed and survive. Xiaoyang, on the other hand, stood there and carefully observed his surroundings. Now that several large tribes had already dispatched people to pursue them, it was hard to say when they would appear in front of him. Therefore, it was not a problem to be more cautious. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Luo's originally chaotic breathing began to recover. His complexion also looked better. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, all the poison inside Luo's body was dissolved. Immediately, he felt refreshed and comfortable. As for the injuries he suffered before, they were nothing. The injuries were not fatal. The poison was. "Thank you for your help." Luo smiled and paid his respect. Luo was in a great mood. He did not think that the situation of certain death would be resolved. He himself would be able to leave the realm of beasts alive. Our common enemy is the realm of beasts. This is a small matter. Xiaoyang said. Mo Luo's thoughts were not bad. From the other's actions and words, he knew that the other was here to form an alliance. Saving him would be the best opportunity for him to do so. However, Mo Luo shook his head helplessly. Such an unusual way of doing things made it hard for others to see through and figure it out. Speaking of which, the reason why I could escape before was because of you. Now that you have saved my life, I should be thankful. It's just a pity that I can only repay your kindness in your next life, Mo Lao said with a smile. Chapter 25:12. Xiao Yang's face sank when he heard that. He could glean a lot of information from that sentence. He just never thought that Mo Luo would turn on him so quickly. He originally thought that he could bring him a powerful ally with this mission. Even the alliance with the Yin Flame world was close at hand. However, the world did not develop as he wished. Mo Luo shook his head helplessly. He knew that what he did was not right. However, he did not want to lose his life for no reason in the current situation. As a result, sometimes making a choice was unavoidable. As long as it wasn't him, it was enough. He did not want to give up his thousands of years of cultivation in the myriad beast realm just like that. Mo Luo was shocked when he saw that Xiao Yang's expression did not change much. Was this guy really not emotional at all? Did he have everything under his control? If that was the case, then it was indeed terrifying. Are you not worried or afraid at all? Mo Luo asked, unwilling to give up. The other party's reaction was far too calm. There were no ripples at all. This calmness made Mo Luo feel a little guilty. Since this person was so good at scheming, if he really had everything under his control, he might have left something behind. It's not too late for you to turn back now. Xiaoyang smiled bitterly and shook his head helplessly. He was a mighty 5th-level martial king, someone with a lot of prestige in the Yin Flame world. Who would have thought that he would do something like this today? This question was immediately thrown back to Mo Luo. This was because the other party's calmness and composure were far too abnormal. It was so abnormal that it was chilling. He did not even understand what was going on. As for whether the other party was trying to be mysterious or not, Mo Luo could not tell all. Everything that was happening right now was simply inconceivable. In fact, he was even starting to panic a little. I'm sorry. I want to live too. Mo Luo smiled bitterly. He had been heavily injured in the battle and had even been hit by Shi Yunfeng's poisonous palm. Under such circumstances, how could he escape from Xing Tian's pursuit? He had indeed been caught. However, Xing Tian knew very well that killing Mo Luo would not solve the root of the problem. Therefore, they had to fish out the mastermind behind the scenes. Thus, Mo Luo, who was very likely to become an ally, naturally became the best choice. As the saying goes, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. The mastermind behind the scenes would not be able to do much on his own in the myriad beast realm, so it was inevitable that he would need help. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Xing Tian made the choice to use Mo Luo as bait to lure out Xiaoyang. As long as they could find these troublemakers and set up an inescapable net, they would naturally be able to easily surround and kill them. In the future, they would no longer have to worry about anyone causing trouble in the myriad beast realm and making them run for their lives. As for the other party's strength, Xing Tian also made an estimation. Even if he took everything into account, the other party would probably not exceed the 5th order realm. Therefore, it was very easy to surround and kill them. Of course, there was a prerequisite for this. That was to make him walk out from the shadows into the light. Only by finding him and fighting him head-on would they be able to do so. If the other party continued to hide in the shadows, then it would be impossible to guard against him. This deal was made very quickly because Xing Tian told him that as long as he found the mastermind, he would be able to leave the myriad beast realm alive. Mo Luo, who was already at the end of his rope, had no choice but to agree. Anyone could die, but not him. Moreover, The other party was someone he had never met before. But do you know that doing this will personally end your last chance of survival? Xiao Yang said calmly. He had never thought that Mo Luo would be so spineless. One had to admit that he had truly misjudged this time. Xiao Yang was not the only smart person in the world. In the myriad beast realm, there were also some people who were unfathomable. They were also very smart and knew what to do to achieve their goals. When Mo Luo heard this, he was shocked once again. The reason for that was because he was truly afraid. He felt a chill rising from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, Xiao Yang also sensed the three powerhouses surrounding him from different directions. However, he was in no hurry to leave. He wanted to meet these people very much. So what if he used this opportunity to do so? Moreover, if he were to flee in a panic, he would be looked down upon by others. At that time, he would definitely be hunted down endlessly. As such, he might as well put on an act so that they would always be wary of him and not dare to pursue him. There's nothing I can do. Mo Luo shook his head with a bitter smile. Although Mo Luo was very wary of the black-robed man, he had already sent out a signal. The powerhouses of the myriad beast realm were about to arrive. Once they arrived, his danger would naturally be resolved. Xiao Yang shook his head. Since you are only a chess piece, then there's no need for you to continue existing. As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Luo felt the senses of his soul turn cold. His body began to tremble as a heart-wrenching pain tormented him. Since Xiao Yang was able to give him the antidote, he could also poison him without anyone noticing. How could the poison last for a long time? It would only take 2 hours for the poison to be completely neutralized by Shi Yunfeng's poison palm. However, who would have thought that Mo Luo would be so impatient? He was seeking his own death. Xiao Yang didn't want to use this move either. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After Xiao Yang arrived, he had already calculated. Even though Mo Luo could do something so crazy when he was extremely angry, the tribes of the myriad beast realm didn't manage to intercept him. However, the large tribes didn't manage to intercept them. This was a problem. Therefore, he made a precaution based on this thought. He didn't think that it would actually become a reality. It was heartbreaking. However, it didn't matter if it did. As long as he could take him down, it was enough. Feeling the poison multiplying wildly and wreaking havoc in his body, Mo Luo felt so regretful that even his intestines turned green. Originally, he wanted to get rid of the poison first. Then he wouldn't be controlled by the myriad beast realm anymore, and he could leave as he pleased. However, he didn't think that this guy had a trick up his sleeve. The two types of poison attacked each other, worsening Mo Luo's injuries. He couldn't even control himself anymore as he screamed in pain. In the blink of an eye, 3 people appeared in 3 different directions. They formed a triangle and surrounded the black-robed man. Chapter 25:13. It was Xing Tian. He was standing opposite the black-robed man. Xing Tian was also carefully sizing up the black-robed man. This guy was not simple. He almost caused a conflict in the entire Wanshou realm and even developed to the point of no return. If he continued to exist, it was likely that he would cause more trouble for them in the future. Xing Tian had spent a lot of effort to find out who the other party was. However, when he saw that this person was so ordinary, he felt a little strange. As for Mo Luo, who was suffering, Xing Tian did not even look at him. So what if they were in the same realm? In the end, this guy was just a chess piece. Whether he existed or not, it didn't matter to the guy hiding in the dark after he came out of the water. Looking at the black robe, Xing Tian's brows furrowed slightly. He was very clear that this was Bai Wuxi's black robe. Xing Tian felt that it was a pity that such a rising star was gone just like that. Xing Tian even predicted that the southeast region would eventually be unified by the White Bear tribe. It would just take some time. There was no other reason. He only thought highly of Bai Wuxi's talent. Shi Yunfeng looked at Mo Luo, who was in pain from the side. His expression also changed slightly. This made him clear that this black-robed man was also proficient in using poison. No wonder he could kill Xie Jianqing in the shortest time. It turned out that he knew about it. It was also because of this that even if the Confusion tribe and the Scorching tribe did not start a war, if the other party used poison, it would create a lot of trouble for the Confusion tribe. Therefore, Xi Yunfeng felt that this person was very dangerous and had to be eliminated as soon as possible. Otherwise, the Confusion tribe would have to take the blame in the future. As for the other person, it was not Zhu Hong. Due to Zhu Hong's injuries and the fact that she couldn't be agitated, she even had to hide this matter from him. The person who came was another rank 5 almighty of the Scorching tribe, Zhu Lai, who was in charge of Zhu Lubin's safety. Zhu Lai left because he had to help open the tomb. He did not expect that Zhu Lubin would be assassinated after he left. This caused him to feel heartache. Therefore, he hated the black-robed man even more. In the blink of an eye, 3 rank 5 almighties had arrived. No matter how one looked at it, it would not be an easy task to break out of such a tight encirclement. Since ancient times, heroes have always come from the young. I wonder why you're cowering and not daring to reveal your true face. Or are you saying that you've always been hiding in the shadows and don't dare to let others know about you? Xing Tian taunted. Now, Xing Tian could clearly see that this was definitely not his true appearance. Such an ordinary face was obviously caused by the use of a disguise technique. Xiaoyang only sneered and did not answer. Because he felt that such a statement was meaningless, why bother arguing with it? When Xing Tian saw that the other party didn't say a word, he started to feel resentful. However, he quickly regained his composure. Although he couldn't see his opponent's true face, he felt that he was indeed a very good opponent from his opponent's layout and response. Unfortunately, because of the current situation, he couldn't fight this person alone. Xing Tian, you said that you'll let me go if I find the mole in the Four-Realm Alliance. Emo Luo cried out in pain. Now that Xing Tian and the others had become Emo Luo's lifesavers, he naturally had to hold on to them tightly. When Xing Tian heard this, he smiled and nodded. Of course, he wouldn't deny this. Moreover, from his point of view, Emo Luo wouldn't be able to cause any big trouble. On the contrary, the black-robed man was the real threat. This was because his brain was too good. He knew how to instigate conflicts between the tribes. If all these conflicts were to explode, it would be a disaster for the Wan Beast realm. Save me! Emo Luo cried out in pain. Xing Tian smiled and nodded. Don't worry, after we take him down, we'll naturally save you. Now, Xing Tian was also calculating in his heart. Since the other party could make Emo Luo suffer silently, and it was obvious that he had expected this, then he might have some other tricks up his sleeve. This trick of inviting the other party into a trap. Was the other party purposely trying to test their abilities? As he thought about this, Xing Tian naturally had more and more questions. He even felt a little helpless. He didn't expect to be schemed against one day. My senior brother Xie Jianqing was also killed by you? Xi Yunfeng asked angrily. Xiaoyang smiled and nodded. Now that most of his information had been exposed, there was no point in denying it. Therefore, he might as well admit it frankly and let them have some more scruples. My nephew Zhu Lubin's death was also your doing. Zhu Lai asked angrily. Xiaoyang nodded as well. His expression was still as calm as ever. In his opinion, all of this was extremely normal, and there was no need to flatly deny it. After receiving these answers, Zhu Lai and Shi Yunfeng's emotions fluctuated intensely. This black-robed young man was their greatest enemy. If they couldn't kill him with their own hands, how could they be at ease? Xing Tian was still thinking. This person didn't panic in the face of danger. Even when he was surrounded, he still looked happy and at ease. Could it be that he really had some powerful tricks up his sleeve? He had nothing to fear. That was it. Xing Tian was also carefully observing his surroundings. If this was a trap targeted at them, then they would be the turtles in the jar. However, everything was very normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary or strange. This made Xing Tian even more puzzled. He really couldn't understand what was going on. This person was so fearless, yet he couldn't see any traps. This was the most worrying thing. Are you really not worried at all? Xing Tian frowned and asked. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Even though the three of them were level 5 powerhouses, they were still afraid of falling into an embarrassing situation. Therefore, he was even more worried and afraid. Xiaoyang didn't say anything. However, he secretly told Princess Mingzhu to prepare to make a move. Princess Mingzhu didn't appear all this time because she was secretly providing support. She was afraid that something unexpected would happen. As expected, the situation that Xiaoyang was worried about still happened. However, this wasn't that important anymore. Since they had a plan to deal with it, then they could escape. If they let them escape this time, then these people would be even more fearful in the future. It might even reach the point where they wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Green Sky Sword Rain. Chapter 25:14. At that moment, Xing Tian and the others all looked up in a daze. Countless strands of sword qi rained down like rain. The killing intent was even more terrifying. At that moment, the three of them were extremely shocked. This black-robed man was truly cunning. He actually dared to risk his life to lure them out of the God Calamity Mountain range, and even wanted to kill them with a scheme. His intentions were truly terrifying. The sword qi was so terrifying that the three of them dared not slack off at all. They all circulated their techniques, preparing to block the sword qi first. If they could not block the sword qi, they would probably be injured, even if it was not fatal. If they were already injured before the battle had even begun, how were they supposed to fight? Xiaoyang stood where he was, watching coldly. At the same time, his gaze rapidly wandered around as if he was searching for something. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoyang directly used the 7 steps of the God of Barbarians, leaving the place with an extremely ingenious movement technique. Xing Tian saw this. He wanted to chase after him, but under the pressure of the sword qi, he would probably be injured if he acted rashly. As a result, he could only give up on that thought. The three of them were all capable of blocking the sword qi, but due to the restriction of poison, Emo Luo could only take it head-on. By the time all the sword qi had fallen, Xiaoyang was nowhere to be seen. After him, Xing Tian roared furiously. The three of them immediately chased in the direction Xiaoyang had disappeared in. It had taken them so much effort to get him to surface. If they let him escape like this, then the trap they had set up and the price they had paid before would probably be for nothing. Since they had an opportunity, they naturally could not miss it. Emo Luo lay on the ground, howling in agony. After seeing so many powerful figures leave, he felt even more despair. He had originally placed his hopes on the powerful figures of the world of beasts. With Shi Yunfeng's ability in the way of poison, they might be able to save his life. But now they had left. Lying there, it seemed like he could only wait for death. Thinking of that, Emo Luo's heart was filled with even more pain. He had never thought that he would end up in such a miserable state after doing everything he could to survive. Xing Tian had indeed promised to let Emo Lao go, but he had never said that he would save him. By not chasing after them, he was fulfilling his promise. As for Emo Luo's life and death, it naturally became somewhat unimportant once he had achieved his objective. Moreover, from Yu Xingtian's point of view, the most important thing was still to take down Xiaoyang. Everything else could be put aside for now. However, Xiaoyang's speed was very fast. Although they chased in one direction, the end result was nothing. It was as if the black-robed man had already disappeared without a trace. Because the black robe could conceal his aura, he could simply find a place where these powerful beings could not detect him. Therefore, they were once again in the state of looking for a needle in a haystack. To find him again was harder than ascending to the heavens. Xing Tian stood where he was, feeling even more resentful. He had carefully laid out the plan, but he didn't expect that the other party would still escape. If he could bring a few more powerhouses over, things would not have turned out this way. However, he also needed manpower to open the tomb, so he brought almost all of the rank 5 experts with him. However, the end result was very unsatisfying. Shi Yinfeng was silent, because under such circumstances, he had no way of persuading Xing Tian. After all, everything was set in stone. It wasn't so easy to clear things up. Zhu Lai was even more furious. I didn't think this guy would be so hard to catch like a loach. Xing Tian could only bitterly smile helplessly. How could he be certain about something like this? It seems like we are in for a lot of trouble. Xing Tian bitterly smiled. Since the other party was once again hiding in the dark, they would most likely do something to avenge themselves. When that happens, the entire central region might suffer because of this. However, to Xing Tian, if the other party dared to make a move, then to them, this was definitely good news. As long as they make a move, there will be traces left behind and they will be able to find them. If the other party had been hiding in the dark like a ticking time bomb, then that would be the most terrifying thing. Moreover, the longer they hid, the more terrifying their schemes would be. Let's go back first. Don't tell Brother Zhu about this for now, so that he won't overthink, Xing Tian said helplessly. Shi Yinfeng and Zhu Lai nodded one after another. They also knew that with Zhu Hong's current condition, if he knew about these things, he would most likely be angered to the point that it would have a great impact on his injuries. Although the three of them kept their mouths shut, the news still spread like wildfire. Immediately, the entire God Tribulation Mountain Range was in an uproar again. Especially after Zhu Hong found out about this, she became even more furious. Her anger attacked her heart, and her injuries became even more serious. Some of the speculations made many cultivators feel that they were in danger. This was because the black-robed man hiding in the dark might take revenge at any time. When that time came, would their tribes also end up extinct? As a result, there were even more people patrolling the God Tribulation Mountain Range. At the same time, because Xiaoyang was using the face of the Wanshou realm, many people didn't dare to easily travel with him. This was because they didn't know if the person beside them was a native cultivator or an invader from the Four Realm Alliance. When Blinds will learn the news, he was even more terrified. He never thought Xiaoyang would be so bold. That being said, if this Master Xiao could escape from danger and instill fear in many people, it was enough to tell how powerful he was. His appearance this time did not affect him in the slightest. On the contrary, the cultivators of the God Tribulation Mountain Range would be intimidated and terrified. He had achieved his goal, just like that, intimidating everyone. Blindswa was actually looking forward to seeing if his tribe could go further with Xiaoyang's help, rescuing Emoluo but falling into the trap. This matter to Xiaoyang indeed had no effect at all. He used a technique to cover up the black robe and then change his face. He once again turned into an ordinary martial emperor expert from the beast's realm. He wandered in the Shinong mountain range, almost no different from the treasure hunter. If the place was full of people from the major tribes, it would be difficult for them to hide. However, there were too many people, so it was naturally messy. It was the best way to fish in troubled waters. Besides, after the commotion, no one would easily get close to each other, so it was even harder for them to expose themselves. For a moment, the people of the God Tribulation Mountain Range were in a panic. At the same time, there were many rumors going around. Chapter 25:15. After Bai Jian left on his sword, many people saw that scene. Immediately, the Sword Heart World's evaluation of Bai Jian changed again. Many people thought that this high-spirited young man would be unable to recover from the setback and spend the rest of his life in endless regret. However, he stood up again. When everyone found out that Bai Jian had gone to the Beast Realm to rescue Xiaoyang, they were even more shocked. Of course, there were also opposing voices. In their opinion, with Bai Jian's current strength, he would only cause trouble for Xiaoyang if he went to the Beast Realm. Even if he stepped into the second level of the Martial Emperor realm again, with his strength, he would only be courting death. There was no meaning at all. In fact, Xiaoyang might even be disturbed in order to protect his life and it would be difficult for him to complete his mission. However, the matter had already become a foregone conclusion, and no one could stop it. Bai Jian was not in the sword heart world, so it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find him and stop him. The genius of the past was now mixed with praise and criticism. Once he was also known as the existence of hope and could even open a new chapter. However, because of some unforeseen events, he was no longer the same person as before. Moreover, there were indeed too many possibilities in these matters. Li Fengmu was still standing on the sword scar abyss. It seemed that standing here often had formed a habit for him. When he had nothing to do, he liked to stand here for a while. It seemed that he could feel many things here, and even benefited a lot. "Ancestor, are you also going to the sword scar abyss?" Li Chunyi asked with a smile. It could be said that the things hidden in the sword scar abyss were things that most cultivators of the sword heart world wanted to obtain. In fact, every sword cultivator wanted to make a trip there. However, because there were too many precedents, many people were terrified and did not dare to take the risk. After all, if they went to the sword scar abyss, even if they could walk out, all of their cultivation would probably turn into nothingness. Even their temperament might suffer a great blow, and it would be difficult for them to take half a step forward. Because of all these connections, Li Fengmu had been filled with dread. However, Bai Jian broke this rule. He walked out and even received the power of the sword scar abyss, successfully allowing him to break through his perplexity and begin a new journey. Li Fengmu shook his head with a smile and said, "The sword intent of the sword scar abyss has almost been completely taken away by Bai Jian. Even if we go down now, I'm afraid we won't be able to gain much." Li Fengmu smiled helplessly. Back then, he did have many thoughts. However, after Bai Jian borrowed the sword, everything became empty talk. That young man was still as proud as ever. It could be said that he was everyone's pride. This was because he had done something that no one in the past had been able to do. Perhaps this was what they meant by "there can be no construction without destruction." Bai Jian had entered the sword scar abyss resolutely because of his broken state of mind. Perhaps it was due to many prerequisites that such a person was created. The right time, the right place, and the right people seemed to be indispensable. Sometimes one couldn't just look at things one-sidedly. Hearing this, Li Chunyi smiled proudly. His senior brother was like this, able to create miracles that many people found hard to understand. Li Fengmu felt a little disappointed in his heart. Although it was indeed an opportunity for Bai Jian to reach where he was today, it was gratifying. However, the regret in his heart would probably become an existence that would never be able to make up for. Even though he had already reached the fourth order martial emperor realm, there were some things that he could not make up for if he missed them. If Bai Jian can come back from the beast realm this time, his future will be limitless. Li Fengmu said with a smile. This was also what Li Fengmu valued the most. If Bai Jian could really make a great contribution and return to the Sword Heart realm, he would definitely have a lot of support. Moreover, with his aptitude and prestige, he might even be able to push the Sword Heart realm to a new height. Li Chunyi's lips curled into a faint smile because, in his opinion, there seemed to be nothing that his senior brother couldn't do. When he returned, he would definitely show the attitude of a king returning. Therefore, this kind of waiting was worth it. Moreover, this was also related to the survival of their Sword Heart realm. They had just been promoted to a middle world, and they were already facing such a strong enemy like the Beast Realm. It was hard to say what they would encounter in the future. Therefore, only by being strong enough could they protect themselves. In the endless sea of stars, a white-robed youth turned into a sword rainbow and left as if nothing could stop him. Bai Jian wandered here alone with a sword, and he only had one destination, the Beast Realm. Now, as time passed, his realm had climbed to third-level martial emperor. The speed was so fast that it made people speechless. If others knew, they would probably be amazed. Bai Jian's realm cultivation could be said to be advancing by leaps and bounds. Now, Bai Jian's heart was filled with countless heroic feelings, as if the past had become the past, and the current by Jian was also extraordinary. Wherever the sword light went, it was bright and dazzling. In these few days, the God Tribulation Mountain Range was very restless. Increasing the amount of money spent between the clans made this place even more chaotic. Even though they searched freely, they could not find the slightest clue, which made them feel even more aggrieved. What was going on? Walking aimlessly like this really made people feel vexed. But now that things had come to this, they could only try their best to find the whereabouts of the black-robed man, hoping to find him as soon as possible and get rid of him. Fortunately, even though there had been a lot of activity in the past few days, nothing unexpected had happened. If something else happened, they would probably have a big headache and it would be difficult to deal with. Now that things had come to this, no one could pursue the matter. They could only take one step at a time. The tomb opened as scheduled, and a high number of cultivators rushed into it, fighting to be the first to find the fortune that belonged to them. It could be said that the moment the tomb opened, the matter of the black-robed man came to an end. Although it was important to guard against the black-robed man behind their backs, they also knew that the opportunities in the tomb were even more important. If they could obtain their own opportunities in it, they might have even greater achievements. All of this made people even more hopeful. In fact, almost all the mighty figures of the major tribes had gone. Even the 6th-level old monsters, who usually did not show their faces, had entered the tomb, as if they wanted to use this opportunity to break through their shackles. Chapter 25:16. Looking at the tomb that was already opened, there was only one entrance, and it was guarded by the powerful figures of the various tribes. It would not be easy to sneak in. In the beginning, there was a riot. The powerful figures of the various tribes wanted to enter, but in the end, He Kuei stepped in. With his strength as a 6th-order martial emperor, they did not dare to move. He Kuei looked at the people present indifferently and snorted. This opportunity belongs to the beast's realm. It is not the private property of the few tribes. Anyone can enter. However, it should not be so chaotic. Otherwise, some people with ulterior motives will sneak in. Under the powerful pressure, the martial emperors did not dare to say anything. After all, they were not strong enough in front of He Kuei. Perhaps he could turn them into ashes with a wave of his hand. Of course, the various tribes did not dare to take the opportunity in the tomb for themselves. Otherwise, all the powerful figures who came would not agree. Once a chaotic battle broke out. Although the various tribes could suppress it if they worked together, the consequences would be unimaginable. He Kuei looked at the people who were about to lose their minds and was angry. These people were really short-sighted. They only saw the benefits in front of them and forgot about the black-robed man. The experts standing next to He Kuei also released their auras, suppressing the group of martial emperors to the point that they could hardly breathe. Go in one by one. I want to see how you can sneak in, He Kuei said coldly. Once he said that the elites of the various tribes took the lead and entered. As for the rogue cultivators, they could only line up and enter slowly. Although they entered slowly, it was inevitable that the various tribes would take most of the opportunity. However, they could not do anything. They could only eat some leftovers on this trip. It was fine as long as they could eat, but it was better than nothing. With this thought in mind, everyone's thoughts became a little better, and they no longer had so many worries. After calming everyone down, He Kuei and Xing Tian stood at the entrance and carefully looked at every martial emperor who entered. At the same time, they wanted to find that guy. If they really let him sneak in, not only would he take away the opportunity, some people might die because of it. Since the other party came to the God Tribulation Mountain Range at this juncture, this was probably his plan. Therefore, it was better to be careful and not let him take advantage of the loophole. Xiao Yang looked at the powerful figures guarding the entrance and felt helpless. If they wanted to sneak in now, they would be walking into a trap. Princess Ming Zhu also appeared to be somewhat anxious. They still had plans, and they could not let it go to waste just like that. Furthermore, She could also sense that the opportunities inside would most likely be extraordinary. If he could get his hands on some of them, he might be able to improve his strength significantly. However, it wasn't going to be an easy task to get in. You stay here and watch. They can't be guarding the entrance of the cave forever. Perhaps the other entrances will be opened by others soon. Xiao Yang said in a low voice. After all, there was only a single entrance. If one were to enter in such a manner, some impatient people might have some thoughts. Although it would take some time, it did not matter. If they were too impatient, they would only expose themselves. If they dealt with the matter calmly now, they might gain something different. Princess Mingzhu nodded, but the anxiety in her heart could not be alleviated. After all, it was very tiring to be in such a state. I'll leave for a while first. It's best if you don't go in before I return, Xiaoyang continued. Hearing this, Princess Mingzhu's brows couldn't help but tremble. She glanced sideways at her companion. What else did he want to do now? Xiaoyang smiled mysteriously. Suddenly he thought of something else. If he could succeed, there might even be some unexpected gains. Moreover, it wouldn't take long. Go quickly and return quickly. Be careful, Princess Mingzhu said after hesitating for a long while. Since Xiaoyang had already made up his mind, it would be difficult to change it. Moreover, at such a critical juncture, it must be something extremely important. Otherwise, why would he leave in such a hurry? After giving a few instructions, Xiaoyang turned around and left. Before he left the boundary of Shennan mountain range, he heard some rumbles. It was evident that some restless people could not hold themselves back anymore, so they were preparing to open a path to enter the tomb. At that moment, Heikue was so furious that his face turned green. However, as the rumbles grew louder and more people joined in, it seemed rather out of place for him to stand guard there. It was completely useless. As the saying went, the law could not punish the majority. He could not kill all the troublemakers right now, right? If he really did that, the conflicts between the clans and the other clans would be completely stirred up. Once the war began, the situation would probably develop into an uncontrollable state. Heikue almost could not calm down when he thought about that. He was extremely displeased. But what could he do? Things were ever-changing, and that had always been the case. Since we can't stop them, let's go in first, an old man in black said with a bitter smile. Then we'll do as Brother Zhu says, Heikue said with a bitter smile. At this point, Heikue also felt powerless to stop them, so he might as well relax and let them cause trouble. As long as he could grab the main opportunity, it would be enough. As for the black-robed man, it was inevitable that he would seize the chaotic situation to sneak in, but there was nothing he could do about it. The general trend was like this, so it was still very difficult to forcefully change it. Moreover, at such a critical juncture, there was no need to make every link perfect. Sometimes, no matter how much effort one put in, the returns one reaped were very limited. No matter how capable one was, it was difficult to reverse the situation. Immediately, some mighty figures from the clans directly entered the tomb. As for other matters, they could only wait until later. If that brat really dared to enter the tomb, powerhouses would gather inside. By then, no matter how capable he was, it would be difficult for him to escape in the end. With that thought in mind, they felt slightly better and entered without any burden. As for the gate that was guarded, it was naturally cancelled. Immediately, everyone began to file in again, and the scene became extremely chaotic and difficult to stop. Chapter 25:17. Xiao Yang ran all the way and appeared on the Skyfire Mountain. Earlier, when he was still having a headache about how to enter the tomb, he suddenly had an idea. All the powerful people wanted to break through the shackles and head to the God Calamity mountain range. Then, the Scorching Flame tribe's nest would naturally become much more empty. Of course, the defenses here were not empty. However, there were pitifully few powerhouses above the third level of Martial Royal Realm. As for the Martial Royal Realm powerhouses below that level, there were still quite a few. This was the foundation of the upper three tribes. They had countless martial royal realm powerhouses. Even if the powerful people of the tribe had left, the defenses here would not be slack in the slightest. However, Xiaoyang was wearing a black robe. In addition, he had intentionally concealed his aura. Therefore, he had quietly snuck into the mountain without being discovered. Moreover, many people's thoughts were on the God Calamity mountain range. They had never thought that someone would be so bold as to sneak into their main sect. Xiaoyang stood on the Sky Fire Mountain. As he felt the hot aura coming from the mountain, the smile on his face grew wider. There was probably a decent, heavenly fire hidden in the Sky Fire Mountain range. When he got close, Xiaohua had expressed his desire. However, at that time there were many powerhouses on the Sky Fire Mountain range. If he wanted to steal the heavenly fire, he would be seeking his own death. However, those powerhouses had already entered the tomb and did not have the time to care about this place. As for the martial royal realm powerhouses here, with their strength, they could not cause much trouble for Xiaohua. With a thought, Xiaohua immediately appeared. When he sensed the aura below, he was very excited. The heavenly fire in the volcano was like a delicacy that he had longed for a long time. If he could swallow it into his stomach, it would definitely be an extremely delightful thing. You'd better be quiet so that you don't alarm them. If anything happens, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to come and help you. Xiaoyang smiled bitterly and helplessly. When Xiaohua heard this, he tried his best to suppress the excitement in his heart. He nodded repeatedly as if he understood. Xiaoyang looked at Xiaohua dotingly. If Xiaohua could plunder the spirit chi of this heavenly volcano, his strength would increase by a lot. At that time, their confidence to roam freely in the myriad beast realm would become even stronger. Go, but be careful, Xiaoyang whispered. Lil Flame was no longer in high spirits, but it was obvious from the rising flames that it was very happy. In the next moment, he dove in and was prepared to enjoy this feast. When he saw Huahua still didn't alarm anyone after entering, Xiaoyang restrained his aura and intended to leave slowly. Although they could indeed attack and destroy the main sect of the Scorching Flame tribe, there wasn't much meaning in doing so. As long as the top powerhouses didn't die, they would have the opportunity to struggle at death's door. Once a top powerhouse fell, there would be no one to hold the fort, and they would naturally fall into chaos. However, once Xiaoyang's plan succeeded, the Scorching Flame tribe would probably decline because of this change. After all, the rise of their tribe was closely related to the heavenly volcano mountain. As for the martial emperors who stayed in the main sect, their realms were relatively low, and because they were absent-minded, many changes had happened in the heavenly volcano mountain quietly, but they didn't notice it. On the way back, Blinds was sent news that he had successfully sneaked into the tomb. Xiaoyang could only laugh at this. What kind of opportunity Blinds would get next would depend on his own ability. Ever since some things were exposed, they hadn't met each other again. Although such a spy wasn't enough, he couldn't abandon him so easily. If it weren't for their help, it would have taken a lot of effort to do these things well. Moreover, it wasn't Xiaoyang's style to get rid of people once they had outlived their usefulness. If he got some opportunities in the tomb, it wouldn't matter if he gave them to Blindswa and Blindswa if they were suitable. The more chaotic the myriad beast realm was, the more advantageous it would be for them. Moreover, Blindswa and Blinds were very ambitious. If they were allowed to become stronger, they would want more and more. He had something on them, so they didn't dare to attack the Four Realms Alliance. When the time came, they could only start an internal war to solve this problem. Xiaoyang was very clear about the ability to control people's hearts. However, it would be difficult to achieve the exact same result. It could even be said that it was difficult to do. However, this wasn't important anymore because it could only be achieved step by step. Now it was just a vision. When Xiaoyang returned to the God Disaster Mountain Range and met up with Princess Mingzhu, the sky was completely dark. It was difficult to see anyone on the God Disaster Mountain Range. That was because most people had rushed in. The entire mountain range had become a scene of devastation. There were too many cultivators who wanted to take shortcuts. Thus, They had dug out entrances all over the place. Some of them accidentally opened up a new path, but there were also a lot of people who were unlucky and attacked the formation and died from the backlash. In a short day's time, the Divine Tribulation mountain range could be said to have undergone earth-shaking changes. There was now a hint of blood in the anxious atmosphere. Princess Mingzhu watched all of this in silence. As more and more experts entered, she felt less and less pressure. However, the anxiety in her heart did not change in the slightest. "Looks like you've gained quite a lot this time," Princess Mingzhu smiled. Xiao Yang shook his head. "I'm just trying. Whether I succeed or not, I'll only know after I see the results." Princess Mingzhu was slightly surprised by that. Now she was truly surprised. She didn't understand what he meant. Since Xiaoyang didn't say anything, she naturally wouldn't ask. She felt that everything Xiaoyang had done was so that they could leave this place alive. Since he was already worried about these things, why should he waste his energy on them? "Let's go. Let us see exactly what this opportunity that has been accumulating for a long time is like," Xiaoyang said with a smile. Princess Mingzhu nodded. She had been waiting for a long time, and she couldn't wait any longer. However, this was the myriad beast realm, not the god realm. As such, she didn't dare to act rashly. Chapter 25:18. Ironically, Heikuei set up a checkpoint at the entrance to stop Xiaoyang and the princess from sneaking in. But now, the two of them swaggered into the room. Because of the chaos, setting up a checkpoint here was meaningless. Therefore, they might as well let the Almighty's guarding here enter the tomb and try their luck to see if they can get their own fortune. Therefore, everything that he had done before was pale and powerless in the face of the bigger picture. One could even say that it was useless. The moment they stepped into the tomb, they instantly smelled a thick scent of blood. It was obvious that after everyone entered the tomb, they did not get along and even started fighting. Sometimes for some small benefits, they would fight and even lose their lives. Not to mention the Wanshou realm. It was very likely to happen in any world. However, in this aspect, the world of beasts was even more vivid. They were beasts. Even though they were in human form, their temperament was difficult to change. In their nature, they were still ferocious and difficult to ignore. After walking for a short distance, as expected, they saw some broken limbs. The scene was even more cruel. Blood was everywhere, and one of the walls was dyed red. It was a shocking sight. Princess Mingzhu felt disgusted at the scene. It seemed that beasts would always be beasts. That was their nature. Even if they took human form, it was meaningless. Sometimes, the way ferocious beasts fought was simple and direct, using the most primitive methods to fight. The result of this was too horrible to look at. Looking at the empty room, Xiaoyang smiled bitterly. This was only the beginning, and such a fierce battle had already broken out. The deeper they went, the more desperate the battle would be. The fight for opportunities had always been never-ending. If they could take it all, why would they give it to others? Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu continued to walk forward slowly. They knew very well that they would not be able to gain anything along the way. After such a long period of time, many of the powerful beings had rushed over like a carpet. It was naturally impossible for them to obtain any opportunities from this place. Sure enough, all they saw along the way were corpses, severed limbs, and blood. The blood had solidified and become very sticky. They could only wrap it with spiritual power to make it more comfortable for them to walk. If someone with a weaker mind walked here, they would feel like they had fallen into purgatory and could not extricate themselves. Princess Mingzhu was a woman, after all. She still felt disgusted and uncomfortable when she saw the scene. Walking on this road that was almost paved with blood and corpses, it was very unpleasant. In fact, even their emotions were greatly affected. However, there was nothing they could do because there was only one path forward. As they walked further, they finally saw some diverging paths, and each path became much cleaner. However, the air in the tomb was still filled with the thick smell of blood. Occasionally, they could even feel some vibrations. It was obvious that some almighties were fighting for fortune. That it had to be said that the tomb's construction was indeed very extravagant. After the battle between the martial emperors, there were only some cracks on the walls. They did not completely shatter or even collapse. It was obvious that the material was extraordinary. Of course, the material was also a problem. It was likely that there was a relatively powerful array supporting it to maintain the stability of the tomb. Otherwise, in the battle between the martial emperors, this place would have collapsed and become a ruin. It would also be difficult to walk around. Many things could be analyzed from these details. For example, the owner of this tomb was probably an extremely terrifying figure in the past. The wealth he had was even more shocking. Otherwise, how could he have built such a tomb? "I wonder what the harvest will be this time," Xiaoyang said with a bitter smile. Because they had entered much later than the cultivators of the myriad beast realm, it was too difficult for them to obtain any benefits from this place. There were too many people who had entered. With such a thorough search, it was likely that not even a blade of grass would have survived. Princess Mingzhu also shook her head with a bitter smile. She had wanted to enter for a long time, but now it seemed that it was better to enter later. If they entered with those lunatics, it would be difficult to avoid a huge battle. At that time, there would be a lot of trouble due to the aftermath. Although it looked like they had gained nothing, if they continued walking, they might be able to pick up some scraps. Of course, it also depended on their luck. Princess Mingzhu's mentality also changed. Since it was difficult to obtain fortune, it was fine. The purpose of their trip was to kill the top experts of the myriad beast realm. If they could pick up some scraps and kill some experts, it would not be a bad thing. It would be a worthwhile trip to eliminate a strong enemy for the Four-Realm Alliance. As they walked further and further, the bloodstains on the ground gradually decreased. However, when they opened the door after door, the result was still the same. It was empty. It could be said that, apart from the walls, everything else had been looted. Because the people of the beast realm were in a hurry, they were like robbers. No matter what they encountered, they would take it first. As for what it was used for, they did not seem to care. When Xiaoyang saw this, he could not help but laugh. However, at the same time, he was also very curious. How many fortune could there be in this tomb that could make people fall head over heels for it, or even go crazy? These questions were difficult to answer. After all, for those cultivators who lacked fortune, once a small opportunity appeared, they would rush like ducks and go crazy. After walking for a long time, Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu also felt a trace of coldness. The two of them looked at each other and quickly walked over. They knew that since there were some strange situations in this tomb, it was probably caused by some treasures. Originally, they didn't have much hope, but now they could feel some opportunities. If they didn't take it, it would be a waste of God's gift. As they got closer, the coldness they felt became heavier and heavier. They even felt a little cold. Chapter 25:19. Xiaoyang furrowed his brows even more when he sensed the coldness. This was because he could sense a sliver of viciousness within the coldness. "Take one of the pills I gave you first. The coldness is poisonous," Xiaoyang said softly. As the ancestor of poisons, Xiaoyang was able to sense the slightest trace of poison in it. Princess Mingzhu was stunned when she heard that. Afterwards, she immediately did as Xiaoyang said. Since he had said that, it meant that there was something wrong with it. Taking a medicinal pill in advance, as a precaution, was naturally not a bad thing. As for whether the pill contained poison, Princess Mingzhu was not worried about that. They had gone through so much together. They had basically gone through fire and water together. He obviously would not use what he did to Emo Luo against her. After taking the antidote, Princess Mingzhu felt much better. She no longer felt so uncomfortable. However, that chill still made people feel extremely uncomfortable and repulsed. Of course, this was all because she had taken the antidote. On the other hand, Xiaoyang couldn't wait for the poison to seep into his body so that he could use it for his own purposes and strengthen his own strength. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoyang's mind suddenly became heavier. He said, "The poison might cause people to hallucinate. Be careful. Don't try to resist it forcefully or it'll backfire." Princess Mingzhu was immediately shocked when she heard that. Such a statement was indeed somewhat unbearable. If she could not even resist it, just how terrifying was the poison? This was extremely shocking to Xiaoyang. This was because when he tried to guide the poison, something happened. Fortunately, he stopped in time, which was why the poison did not mess up the senses of his soul. If he fell into a hallucination without knowing it, it would be difficult to predict what he would do next. Princess Mingzhu felt very relieved when she heard that. At the same time, she was also very curious as to what level Xiaoyang had reached in the cultivation of poison to be able to know all this like the back of his hand. "I'll send some poison over to you. Fighting poison with poison will guarantee that you'll be fine. Don't resist," Xiaoyang said in a low voice. Hearing this, Princess Mingzhu first frowned, then calmly nodded. Since they had gone through life and death together, and had supported each other in the myriad beast realm, and had gone through so much together, if they did not even have this little bit of trust, then what were they? Moreover, she did not believe that Xiaoyang was really a villain who would do anything unkind to her. Soon after, Xiaoyang also pointed at Princess Mingzhu's back. As she did not resist at all, a strand of poison silently entered her body. After that, Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu continued their journey. Soon, they arrived at a relatively spacious area. It was a little dark here, but there was a pool in front of them. In the middle of the pool, there was an extremely beautiful lotus flower. The lotus flower had already bloomed, and it looked even more magnificent. However, the lotus flower was different from ordinary lotus flowers. The lotus flower emitted a faint glow, and the petals were dark green. It looked extremely strange. However, due to the dimness and coldness, the lotus flowers in the pond appeared to have a different kind of flavor. The petals looked like jade, and it made people want to touch them. Just by looking at it, one would be extremely mesmerized. It was as if one would be intoxicated by it, unable to extricate themselves. At that moment, Xiaoyang could not help but feel shocked. He did not expect that there would be such a treasure here. It was really unexpected. If he had not sensed that something was wrong earlier, he might have fallen for it if he continued to look. Princess Mingzhu was also startled awake at that moment because she heard some fighting sounds. Looking up, he saw 2 second-order martial emperors fighting fiercely. However, they didn't seem to have much ability now. They were like ordinary people fighting each other, and the scene was even more tragic. They fought until teeth flew everywhere, and blood splattered everywhere. This was because his cultivation level was slightly lower, and he didn't know the method behind it. So when he was hit in such a state where it was impossible to guard against, he was unable to extricate himself and regain his clarity of mind. Everything was caused by the illusion, causing them to fight even more fiercely. However, because of the poison, the spiritual energy in their bodies was continuously eaten away, and the more deeply they were poisoned, the harder it was for them to extricate themselves. Xiaoyang watched quietly and didn't do anything to stop them. This was a matter of the beast realm, so he naturally would not interfere. However, Princess Mingzhu was secretly shocked. She did not expect the lotus flower to be so terrifying. If Xiaoyang had not sensed it and informed her in time, as well as channeling poison to help her, she would have fallen for it. Thinking about this, Princess Mingzhu was secretly glad that she did not act willfully and forcefully enter this place. Otherwise, she might have already fallen for it, and she would not even know how she fell for it. I did not expect the MOE Jade Lotus to appear here. Xiaoyang could not help but sigh. The MOE Jade Lotus was an extremely poisonous item. If it was refined, it could become a magic weapon. However, it was not that easy to control it. Such an item was very good at bewitching people. In fact, one would fall for it without realizing it, and it was impossible to defend against it. Many people fled at the sight of it, not daring to look directly at it. Of course, Only those who understood the key points would do that. If one did not know and thought that it was a treasure, they would probably directly take it. In the end, they would only turn into a skeleton, and all of their spiritual energy would dissipate, becoming nourishment for that thing. Plop! The two people who were wrestling with each other fell into the pool. After a few splashes, there was no longer any sound coming from them. The pool water also contained an extremely poisonous liquid. If one came into contact with it, they would probably end up without a corpse. This was also why there was very little spiritual energy, even though there had been a great battle here. It was because the spiritual energy within was good nourishment. How could the Mo Jade Lotus allow it to dissipate and not enjoy it? The more Princess Mingzhu looked at it, the more shocked she was. Such a treasure was indeed unfathomable, but this method was a bit too sinister. It even made people feel that it was hard to understand. The more she looked, the more she found it to be pleasing to the eye. She even felt that she should destroy it with a sword to prevent it from continuing to harm people. Chapter 25:20. On the other hand, Xiao Yang's thoughts were the complete opposite. In his opinion, if he could subdue the Mo Jade Lotus, he would benefit greatly from this item in his future cultivation. The poisonous creatures that he reared previously could not be upgraded due to their aptitudes. Hence, the cultivation that they brought to him was pitifully little. In fact, he had to rely on Xie Jianqing's poison power from the Begi tribe to barely achieve a breakthrough back then. If he had the help of the Mo Jade Lotus, his cultivation speed might increase even more. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang was looking forward to it. If he could obtain this item, it would be a worthwhile trip. Even if he could not obtain other treasures, the help that the Mo Jade Lotus could provide to him was not to be ignored. Moreover, if he could refine the Mo Jade Lotus and use it for himself, if he were to be more sinister in the future and secretly place this item in some tribes, he wouldn't have to do anything, and it would be enough to cause the entire tribe to fall into chaos and even cause their own people to kill each other. However, Xiao Yang's thoughts were interrupted by a series of footsteps. Due to the darkness, it was really difficult to notice anyone else if one did not use one's divine ability to look. Moreover, in this dark scene, the Mo Jade Lotus was even more dazzling. It was as if there was only one beam of light in this place. It made one look forward to it and go crazy. One could not wait to run over and chase after its footsteps. There were two people who entered this place. One of them looked very simple and honest, and could be said to be burly. In particular, his bulging muscles gave people a very impressive sense of impact. The other person naturally exuded a domineering aura, which made him look very dignified. After seeing the two of them, Xiao Yang could not help but frown slightly. He did not expect the experts from the few big tribes to barge in at this time. This was rather unexpected. The two of them did not seem to notice Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu, because their gazes landed on the Mo Jade Lotus. That peculiar feeling was constantly telling them that it was a treasure. If they could obtain it, it would definitely be of great help to them. It was as if their hearts were constantly expanding under the influence of the Mo Jade Lotus. Their desires were also gradually rising, and they all wanted to take it for themselves. However, there was only one Mo Jade Lotus, while they had two people. How should they split it? Because of the influence, they had many thoughts in their minds, but they were all afraid of each other. They were the top almighties of the middle three tribes, and their cultivations had reached the 5th level martial royal realm. Even in the entire beast's realm, they could dominate a region. Brother Xian Kuei, have you noticed anything? The tall and sturdy man asked with a smile. That person shook his head and said, "Although I can't see anything, that lotus is definitely not simple." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Treasures that could exist in this tomb naturally couldn't be ordinary. Furthermore, when they looked at the layout of the place, they were even more aware of what was going on. Xiao Yang frowned, because from the tone and appearance of these two people, he already knew who they were. The tall and sturdy man was Ba Feng of the giant elephant tribe, and he was the second expert under the tribe leader. The person called Xian Kuei was the third person in the wild lion tribe, and his cultivation was even more mysterious. He couldn't be underestimated. This Xian Kuei's strength couldn't be underestimated, because the white bear tribes by Li Song had once fought with him. Although they were of the same level, Bai Li Song had lost miserably. From this, it could be seen that the gap between the 10 great tribes, even if they were of the same level, was especially huge. The middle 3 tribes foundation and the lower 3 tribes foundation were as different as heaven and earth. At this time, the two of them also saw Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu. Although they were only dressed like ordinary martial royal realm experts, there was a bit of disgust in their eyes. If you two know what's good for you, quickly get lost. Ba Feng scolded angrily. Since the two of them were here, then the treasures here naturally belonged to them. As for the two of them, who had never seen them before, how could they have the qualifications to touch the treasures? Hearing such a scolding, Princess Mingzhu was extremely displeased, but Xiaoyang pulled her back and shook his head. Soon after, Princess Mingzhu understood the reason behind it. The two of them were so arrogant, they would definitely not be on guard. Therefore, they might as well pretend to leave and wait for the two of them to be affected by the Mo Jade Lotus to attack each other. When both of them were injured, then they would come back to be fishermen. Wouldn't that be perfect? Two sirs, I'm really sorry. We also mistakenly entered this place, and it was really unintentional. We will leave now. Please forgive us. Xiaoyang lowered his voice and said with a courteous appearance. After he finished speaking, he directly pulled Princess Mingzhu away. Now was not the time to fight for the limelight. Since the two of them chose to seek their own deaths, Xiaoyang naturally had no need to stop them. Since he could use the Mo Jade Lotus to get rid of the two strong enemies, why would he need to do it himself? Stop! Xian Kuei suddenly shouted. Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu were stunned for a moment. They had already taken a step back. Could it be that they were not prepared to leave the matter at that? Who knows if the two of you secretly took something away before old Brother Ba Feng and I arrived? You'd better obediently hand it over, or be careful of your life. Xian Kuei said coldly. Immediately, the aura of a fifth-order martial emperor completely erupted, as if it wanted to suppress the two of them until they could not breathe. At this moment, Xiaoyang also felt an extremely strong hostility. It seemed that the two of them were certain that they were hiding some treasure, which was why they showed such an attitude. Although Ba Feng's expression was a little unclear, he also felt that it was naturally not wrong to be a little ruthless. If the two of them really took away something, it would be too late for regrets. Reporting to two sirs, we really did not obtain anything here. Please forgive us. Xiaoyang continued to speak in a low voice. How to deal with them had also become Xiaoyang's current problem. However, this was not a problem. It was best if he could bluff his way through. If he could not, there was no harm in waiting a little longer. After all, the two of them seemed to have already begun to be affected. It was only because their cultivation level was higher that the speed was slower. However, it might take a long time for the effect to be completely released. As he thought about this, Xiaoyang's eyebrows unconsciously furrowed. If they took away the Mo Jade Lotus before this, what would he do? Chapter 25-21. Moreover, Xianren was unwilling to let them go. It was impossible for them to settle this peacefully. How to deal with this became a problem. If they were to attack directly, they would have to join forces to fight the enemy. Although he and Princess Mingzhu were not afraid of a fifth-stage powerhouse, there were two of them. If they were to fight, it would be hard to predict who would win. Moreover, there was the influence of the Mo Jade Lotus. What kind of changes would happen in the end was not within their control. There might even be some unexpected mishaps. Thinking about these problems, Xiaoyang could not help but feel a headache coming on. It seemed that it would not be easy to get this treasure. At the very least, that was the case for now. Who knew if the commotion caused by the fight would attract even more people? Thinking about this, Xiaoyang took a deep breath. He was trying his best to keep himself calm so that he would not be affected by the lotus. If there was a problem with his mind, it would be bad. Therefore, how to deal with it was still a problem Xiaoyang had to face. If they were to turn around and leave, it would not be difficult for them to get the Moe Jade lotus. By then, the treasure that was almost in their hands would have another twist and turn. That would not be good at all. Did you not hear what I said? Xianren was unhappy when he saw that they did not respond. He shouted angrily. In his eyes, the more these two were hiding, the more suspicious they were. Perhaps they really did have some treasures in their hands that were obtained from the tomb. Therefore, since they had encountered these treasures, they should naturally belong to them and not these weak, martial emperors. Even if these treasures were given to them, what use would it be? In the end, it would only affect the effects of these treasures and cause them to be covered in dust. If these treasures were in their hands, they would shine brightly. Princess Mingzhu seemed to be affected as well. Now, she was very unhappy. If Xiaoyang had not held her back, she would have drawn her sword and fought. You must be joking. How could we have any treasures? With our abilities, it's already good enough that we're still alive. Xiaoyang also kept himself calm and faced everything calmly. In his mind, he quickly calculated how to deal with these two people. Since the Moe Jade Lotus had appeared in his eyes, there was naturally no reason for it to be taken away by others. Moreover, if he missed out on the Moe Jade Lotus this time, it would be almost impossible for him to find another matching item. Once an opportunity appeared, if you couldn't grab it and let it slip away, then it was your own problem. You couldn't blame anyone else. When Xianren saw the other party speaking in such a humble manner, he felt that the other party was definitely hiding some treasures. Hurry up and take it out. Don't force my hand. Xianhua shouted angrily. Now, Xianren's tolerance had dropped to the bottom of the valley. How could some unknown little thing dare to deal with him? Wasn't this just asking for trouble? If they said another word, they would have to pay the price. Ba Feng didn't say a word, instead carefully observing his surroundings. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. It was very strange. Perhaps it was because the tomb hadn't seen the light of day for tens of thousands of years, and there were many treasures inside. It was inevitable that there would be many changes in the aura inside. Therefore, it wasn't strange to feel strange. As Ba Feng thought this, he also felt that it was a very reasonable thing. If everything was normal here, then there would be something wrong. Xiaoyang remained silent. With a glance, he had already told Princess Mingzhu to prepare for action. Since the other party was so aggressive, he had no choice but to fight. Moreover, under such circumstances, they might not necessarily be at a disadvantage. If they could get rid of these two people, the Four-Realm Alliance would have to face fewer experts in the future. Thus, it was not a bad choice. Take another elixir in case of any accidents. Xiaoyang informed Princess Mingzhu through the Heart Lake Ripple. Xiaoyang had only seen records of the Moe Jade Lotus in books. As for its effects, he had never personally experienced it, and wasn't very clear. Moreover, his detoxification elixir wasn't refined for the Moe Jade Lotus. Therefore, the effects would inevitably be different. Therefore, taking more was also to be on the safe side to avoid any accidents during the battle. Princess Mingzhu had seen the battle between the two people. In the end, they fell into the pool silently. Knowing the pros and cons, she immediately took another elixir. She didn't dare to be careless and underestimate them. This place was full of strangeness. If they didn't be careful and restrain themselves in such a situation, they would really be courting death. At the same time, Xiaoyang was already prepared. He was calculating in his heart whether he should use thunderous means to kill one of them first. He still had the tail needle in his hand. He could silently launch a sneak attack, causing the other party to fall into endless distress and be unable to extricate themselves. However, if he couldn't kill them, he was afraid that exposing his methods would arouse their suspicions. Seeing that the two guys didn't speak and didn't have the intention to take out the elixir, Xianhua couldn't tolerate it and directly slapped out. Since you dare to look down on us, you must pay the price. And the price won't be small. A strong wind blew. Although it was just a casual slap, it was still a fifth-stage powerhouse's attack. The power of it naturally couldn't be underestimated. For a moment, even the atmosphere became a little stifling because of it. Xiao Yang didn't dare to think too much. He directly slapped out, preparing to block the attack. Suddenly, his whole body was shaken, and he took a few steps back. It seemed to be a little strenuous. Even his whole body was trembling. A casual slap from a fifth-stage powerhouse was so powerful. Xianhua and Ba Feng looked at each other in confusion. They felt that this was indeed a little unbelievable. They were fifth-stage powerhouses. Even if it was a casual slap, it shouldn't be something that a second-stage martial emperor could block. Even if they didn't have the intention to kill, it was enough to seriously injure him and make it difficult for him to get up again. However, the young man seemed to have only been shaken back a few steps. He seemed to have suffered a loss, but he was still standing there. This was an extremely abnormal part. It also made people feel that it was a little unexpected. This matter was indeed strange. There was a big clue in it. Chapter 25-22. Suddenly, Ba Feng and Xianren both thought of another possibility. Taking a closer look, that ordinary-looking person was wearing a black robe. How similar was this to Xing Tian's description? That outsider was very good at disguising himself, changing his appearance to be very ordinary, using this method to fish in troubled waters, making it difficult for others to detect. Oh, I didn't expect to have an unexpected harvest this time. Ba Feng suddenly laughed, and at the same time began to move his hands and feet, as if he was ready to make a move. These characteristics were very similar, and there was no reason for a second-level martial emperor to be able to block Xianren's palm. Therefore, this was enough to explain a lot of problems. The other party was deliberately suppressing himself. Entering this place, there was only one person who needed to hide his aura, realm, and cultivation. It was most likely the mastermind behind this. At this moment, Xianren also came back to his senses, and he laughed, saying, "Now that you mention it, it's really interesting." Previously, they were still worried that the two people would enter the tomb, but in the end they had no choice but to give up guarding it because of the actions of those idiots from the tribes. Now, they didn't expect to meet them here. This was also an unexpected harvest. Those two guys who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth really wanted to try their luck in this tomb and try to find the opportunity that belonged to them. But so what if they came? In the end, they could only give up their lives here. After his identity was exposed, Xiaoyang shook his head, helplessly. Indeed, if he didn't make a move, there wouldn't be any flaws. But just now, in a moment of desperation, it was difficult to hide his identity. Suddenly, Xiaoyang no longer suppressed his aura and directly erupted. This battle was really unavoidable. Seeing this, Princess Mingzhu also drew her sword, ready to fight with these guys and let them know that sometimes the prey's identity could be changed. After sensing the two's aura, Ba Feng and Xianren looked at each other, because they felt that it was a little unbelievable. Even more, it was full of doubts. "You're only fourth-level martial emperors." Ba Feng frowned and asked, if they were only fourth-level martial emperors, how did they kill Xingongqi and Xie Jianqing? This was simply impossible. So where exactly did the problem come from? Or could it be that there was an expert behind them? Or perhaps they were just scheming, and the one who took action was Mo Luo? Or even someone else? Xiao Yang nodded calmly and said, "With such a cultivation level, it's enough to kill you all." Although the other party's strength was not weak, if no one else joined in, it was not impossible for them to fight. Coupled with the influence of the Mo-E Jade Lotus at the side, as long as the battle dragged on for long enough, the probability of killing him would become higher and higher. In any case, they had a very good understanding of the Ink Disaster Jade Lotus and had even made corresponding countermeasures. Thus, delaying it was the safest method. Looking at the sword, Ba Feng's frown deepened. Back then, when they were pursuing the black-robed youth, they were obstructed by a rain of swords. That was why the black-robed youth was able to escape without a trace, and they were unable to successfully pursue him. Could it be that it was done by a woman who was only a fourth-order martial emperor? No matter how one thought about it, it felt a little unreal. Ba Feng and Xianren looked at each other. They felt that there were too many strange things going on. But since they had encountered them this time, they naturally could not let them go just because of these doubts. After capturing them and torturing them, they would naturally be able to find out who was the mastermind behind the scenes. At that time, if they uprooted these guys, it could be considered a great merit. At that time, they would definitely be able to obtain more resources. But one had to know that these guys had caused a lot of trouble in the Myriad Beast realm, causing a lot of headaches. In fact, they had even suffered heavy losses. What an arrogant brat! Xianren said with some disdain. Just 2 fourth-order martial emperors. Where did they get the confidence to challenge 5th-order martial emperors? This was like a firefly saying that its brightness could be compared to the moon. This was a complete joke. Ba Feng clenched his fists. He was now very curious about the strength of these 2 guys, to be able to cause such a big storm in the Myriad Beast realm. In the next moment, Ba Feng made his move and punched out. It was difficult to determine the strength of the other party from their words, but after exchanging blows, he would be able to figure it out. In the next moment, Princess Mingzhu rushed forward, sword light swirling around her sword, and the cold air was oppressive. Streams of sword qi formed a sword barrier, protecting her. At the same time, there were some golden sword qi mixed in, looking more murderous. Suddenly, Ba Feng's brows furrowed slightly, because he had already felt many differences from the sword qi. This kind of fierce attack was indeed beyond the means of many ordinary fourth-order martial emperors. But for Ba Feng, this bit of strength was still not enough. In an instant, the auras of the 2 collided, clashing with each other, and some muffled sounds could be heard. The 2 had not exchanged blows yet, but the attack of their auras had already begun. However, Princess Mingzhu was not afraid. Even if she was facing a 5th-order martial emperor alone, there was not the slightest trace of fear on her face. She also had her own pride, and her thoughts were extremely pure. That was why she was able to display such power and not be at a disadvantage when fighting against him. Under 1 sword and 1 fist, the 2 were forced to retreat. After Ba Feng stood still, his eyes were filled with surprise, because he did not expect this woman to be so strong to be able to force him back. Princess Mingzhu, on the other hand, was very uncomfortable, and even her arms were trembling. Her opponent's strength was indeed very domineering, and even made it difficult for her to resist. Her aura became turbulent under such a violent collision. Xiao Yang frowned slightly, because the previous probing attack was enough to explain many problems. They were indeed at a disadvantage now, and it was not easy to kill these 2 5th-order martial emperors. Although he had already decided to take action, he still had a lot of concerns in his heart. This was because his actions this time might cause a chain reaction. Soon after, his gaze quietly landed on the Moe Jade Lotus. If it were not for the sake of obtaining it, he would not have to continue staying in this place. He could even leave directly. Chapter 25-23. Ba Feng frowned slightly and said in a low, muffled voice, "There must be someone behind these 2. Although they are strong, they are not strong enough to destroy the entire scorpion tribe." Just now, Xianren had also seen everything. Naturally, he could analyze a lot of things from the information he received. Therefore, he had no choice but to be more vigilant. If that Almighty was hiding somewhere, and the 2 of them were just bait, they might fall for it. As for whether he needed to ask for help, that was another matter. At least for now, he didn't want to. Otherwise, if there was one more person, his chances of obtaining the treasures in the pool would be reduced. If they could uproot the people from the 4-realm alliance in the Myriad Beast realm with just the 2 of them, it would be a great contribution. These people were people that even Xing Tian and Shi Yinfeng couldn't take down even if they joined forces. Don't worry, I will stand guard for you. No one will be able to hurt you. Xian Fu crossed his arms in front of his chest and said quietly. Ba Feng nodded. He also knew that the two of them were fifth-order martial kings. If they wanted to guard against a sneak attack, it was still possible. However, if the person hiding in the dark didn't show up, it would still be a little uncomfortable. If they were constantly on guard, they wouldn't be able to display their full strength. In the next moment, Princess Mingzhu didn't seem to be in the mood to listen to their long-winded words, and slashed out with her sword again. Princess Mingzhu's thoughts were so pure. If it was a battle, then it was a battle, using the purest strength to compete and see who was stronger. As long as the difference in strength wasn't too great, there was a chance of victory. As the saying goes, when two rivals meet on a narrow path, the brave will win. It could be said that Princess Mingzhu was sometimes able to complete many impossible challenges by relying on this kind of mentality. Ba Feng saw that the woman didn't know what was good for her and attacked again. He also felt that he was being underestimated and his heart was filled with anger. It was really the first time he was being looked down on like this. It made him very unhappy. In the blink of an eye, Ba Feng also punched out, ready to catch her off guard. Xiaoyang was also not in a hurry to make a move. His gaze was locked on Xian Fu, so that he couldn't attack Princess Mingzhu when she least expected it. Of course, Xiaoyang was mostly observing the differences between Xian Fu and Ba Feng. What was the effect of the Mo-E Jade Lotus on them in battle and under normal circumstances? Xian Hua also felt a little annoyed that the young man was sizing her up. However, because he was afraid that there was someone else in the dark. Even if he had some emotions, he couldn't express them. However, the two of them did not know that there was someone else hiding in the dark. If Xiaoyang and the others really had strong reinforcements, they would have stirred up a storm in the central region long ago. They wouldn't need to try their luck in this place to see if they could kill a few experts by chance. Moreover, Xiaoyang was still unsure about the outcome of this battle. If it wasn't for the existence of the Mo-E Jade Lotus, he would have fled with Princess Mingzhu long ago. He didn't have much confidence in winning this battle. Therefore, he had no choice but to make more calculations. The battle between Princess Mingzhu and Ba Feng was also particularly intense. The two of them didn't hold back at all. However, the more they fought, the more surprised Ba Feng was. This girl's sword moves were so sharp and fierce, and she was fearless. She was even willing to exchange injury for injury, and she didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. This kind of strength was not to be underestimated. Those who didn't know would think that they were of the same cultivation level. However, with a difference of one cultivation level, to be able to be so powerful was already not simple. The more he thought about it, the more shocked Ba Feng was. He even felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. What? You think you can kill me with your gaze? Xian Fu sneered, mocking. Xiaoyang shook his head. But I already have a way to kill you. When he said this, Xian Fu laughed even harder. This was a complete joke. Or was it that the newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger? These guys really didn't know what was going on, and spoke so casually. Could it be that they didn't know what the situation was? However, Xian Fu still thought a little more, because he felt that there must be someone secretly preparing a sneak attack. Otherwise, how could that kid have the guts to speak so arrogantly? Xiaoyang didn't know what Xian Fu was worried about, but he could see that the medicinal power of the Mo-E Jade Lotus was indeed released faster in battle. In the next moment, the Thunder Fire Divine sword appeared in Xiaoyang's hand, glowing with two different sword rays. When Xian Fu saw the sword, he frowned slightly, then laughed again. He didn't expect that this guy was actually preparing to attack. Could it be that he really thought that he could challenge someone of a higher cultivation level? However, that smile quickly froze because Xian Fu thought of another possibility, and that was that the young man was just creating an opportunity. With that thought, Xian Fu didn't dare to be careless. The other party's plan was very ingenious. If he fell for it again, it would really be the biggest joke in the world. Now, Fu's heart was also in a dilemma, whether he should call for help. If this place became a hunting ground, then they might also lose their lives here. However, Fu didn't have time to think about it because Xiao Yang attacked. Plunder like fire! In an instant, the dim, flickering light became warmer and brighter under the illumination of the flames. He used a martial skill right off the bat. Since he couldn't fight for too long, Xiao Yang only had one choice, which was to force the other party to use a big move to speed up the release of the MOE Jade Lotus's poison. Once the poison successfully entered the heart meridian and caused an illusion, or even an illusion, then it would be easy to take him down. Since the venue gave them an opportunity, they naturally had to make good use of it. Sometimes, if they fought with their own strength, the effect wouldn't be that good. If they used their brains more, it might make the whole thing much easier. Furthermore, the reason why Xiao Yang was able to defeat so many strong opponents that he couldn't possibly defeat was because of his strength, but he also needed to use his brain well. When Fu saw that the kid was aggressively charging towards him, he was instantly furious. How dare a clown act like this? Suddenly, Rua let out a low roar and waved his hands continuously. Suddenly, rays of sharp light appeared continuously. His eyes became much more sinister, as if he could cut them into pieces in the next moment, and it was extremely ferocious. Cold Blade Armor Removal. Chapter 25-24. Suddenly, countless rays of cold light surged out, like sharp blades that cut through the darkness. It was invincible. The air was filled with murderous intent. Since the other party was courting death, Fu would not be merciful. Moreover, there might be other terrifying people hiding in the dark. Hence, he decided to kill the ungrateful brat first. Even if there were any changes, he would be able to suppress them. Hence, Fu used a killing move right from the start. The cold light and the flames collided with each other at this moment. The two completely different forces attacked and suppressed each other. Xiao Yang's eyes showed no fear. Since he used a killing move right from the start, he had already made up his mind. He wanted to end the battle quickly. Moreover, he used the MOE Jade Lotus to make it difficult for them to leave this place. If this battle continued for too long, there might be more people who would come later. Once they were completely exposed, it would be impossible for them to escape or obtain more things in the tomb. Now was not the time to hesitate. If they could get rid of the other party quickly, they could not waste any more time. Seeing that the brat was still charging forward bravely, Fu was furious. It seemed that he was used to having a smooth journey. That was why he was so arrogant and did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, the sword aura and the cold light collided, and the sound of explosions rang out continuously. However, the flaming sword aura seemed to be weakened and shattered. Some of the cold light passed through the will and slashed Xiao Yang's body. Everywhere it passed, there was a trail of blood. It was a horrible sight. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, was like an idiot who only cared about killing. As for the price that he would have to pay, he completely ignored it. Fu laughed disdainfully because of the other party's recklessness. It seemed that he was not the person behind the scenes, but someone who had a death wish. Hence, Fu placed more attention on defense. If the person in the dark did not show up, he would be a hidden danger. Perhaps this fellow had only made a move to distract him. However, Lin did not know that his worries were nothing more than paranoia. In the blink of an eye, several more bloody scars appeared on Xiao Yang's body. He was in unbearable pain. From the name of this martial skill, one could tell how ruthless this move was. Since it could even shatter armor, its power was naturally not to be underestimated. Moreover, Xiao Yang's will qi was hard to resist, so one could imagine how powerful it was. However, in the blink of an eye, Xiao Yang had already arrived with his sword. Even though his body was riddled with wounds, he completely ignored them. All of a sudden, Xianren couldn't help but feel shocked. Could it be that this fellow is just a puppet? That was why he was able to charge over without feeling any pain. Moreover, his attacks seemed to have run out. Lightning prison, true fire annihilation. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoyang suddenly changed his move. The sword in his hand trembled, and the flames became even more vigorous. If he wanted to obtain victory in a short period of time, he would not be able to achieve his goal if he did not use some strange moves. Therefore, Xiaoyang did not hesitate to use his own body as bait to make Xianren underestimate his opponent and achieve such a plan. The lightning that suddenly appeared around him blocked all of Xianren's escape routes. He was instantly stunned. Moreover, the sword that was burning with flames was already in front of him. It seemed that it was too late for him to react in time. Xianren was even more upset. How could he be so careless and fall into this fellow's trap? He had always been on guard against the person in the dark. However, he did not expect that the person in front of him was also very difficult to deal with. His strength and ruthlessness could not be ignored. In a hurry, Xianren had already made a decision. Since he was going to fight to the death, there was nothing wrong with that. He was not someone who would wait for death. Even though he knew that he would not be able to avoid the attack, he still threw out a punch. Since both sides were going to suffer, then so be it. He wanted to see if his beast body was strong enough or if Lin Fan's weak human body was strong enough. Boom! Xianren threw out a punch and sent Xiaoyang flying. However, before that happened, the sword had already pierced Xianren's chest. Countless flaming sword auras continued to pour into his body. The flaming sword auras surged and scattered wantonly in his body. As the lightning gathered, Xianren had no choice but to revert to his original form to deal with it. Deafening roars could be heard. Xiaoyang fell to the side. He stood up shakily. After taking the punch head-on, in addition to his previous injuries, it was really difficult for him to resist. However, it did not matter. Since he had already come this far, he naturally had nothing to fear. It was just a fight to the death. Who was afraid of who? Looking at the huge lion, Xiaoyang couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Fortunately, his attack had succeeded. Otherwise, he would have had to fight later. Now that he had achieved his goal, Xiaoyang's gaze fell on the other side. Ba Feng and Princess Mingzhu were fighting fiercely. They had both won and lost, and both of them were injured. However, the two of them had displayed that they were evenly matched. Now Ba Feng was even more shocked. Although this woman was one level lower than him, the strength she displayed was very different. Even he was full of admiration for her. Whether it was her temperament or ability, they were all top-notch. Even in the entire myriad beast realm, there were only one or two people who could be compared to her. Unable to take her down in a short period of time, Ba Feng became very anxious. He felt that such a situation should have been one-sided and ended quickly. However, they had been in a stalemate for so long. As for his injuries, they had also become much more serious. Furthermore, Ba Feng also realized that the scenery here seemed to have quietly changed. He felt that something was not right, but Ba Feng could not put his finger on it. It was as if he was in a dream. Everything seemed unreal. However, in the next moment, Ba Feng felt an extremely sharp sword aura coming at him. He did not dare to think too much and instead relied on his own instincts to deal with it. They were all mighty figures who had fought for countless years. Sometimes their instincts were much more reliable than what they saw and analyzed. Therefore, although Ba Feng's mind was affected and he was not clear-headed, he was still able to deal with it. Black Poison Sting. Chapter 25. In this dark place, Xiaoyang once again grasped the opportunity. He stealthily threw out a stinger in his hand. If Princess Mingzhu were to continue fighting with Ba Feng, who knew how long it would take for them to come to an end. Therefore, Xiaoyang had to use some methods to speed up this battle and end it as soon as possible. No matter how one looked at it, That stinger was like a poisonous stinger hidden in the darkness, silent and undetectable, difficult to guard against. And now, because Ba Feng was also affected by the Mo Jade Lotus, he did not expect that there was a killing move coming from behind him. At this moment, Princess Mingzhu felt it. At the same time, her brows furrowed slightly, and she seemed somewhat displeased. Princess Mingzhu liked to fight head-on, and the feeling of fighting to her heart's content was very comfortable. Toward Xiao Yang's sneak attack, she was more or less dissatisfied, but she did not act willfully. After all, this was a place of life and death. If she did everything according to her heart, she would only end up in a dead end. Qi. The poisonous stinger also silently pierced into Ba Feng's body. Instantly, the two poisons exploded at the same time, and Ba Feng fell to the ground in pain. When he touched the poisonous stinger, he also cried out in pain, unbearable pain. Zhu Lubin died like this, and Zhu Hong was also seriously injured because of this sneak attack. How could they forget this point? Even if Ba Feng regretted it now, it was useless. Shi Yinfeng was not here, so who could help him and suppress the poison? Thinking of this, Ba Feng was in despair. He originally thought that he would be able to make a great contribution this time, but who would have thought that he could only wait for death here today? After confirming that the poisonous stinger had pierced into Ba Feng's body, Xiao Yang's breathing also calmed down a lot. Now that both of them were seriously injured, the next step was to wait for them to lose their lives. Ba Feng fell to the ground, constantly gasping for breath, black blood continuously dripping down. The scene in front of him had changed greatly. Now the Moe Jade Lotus's effects were fully displayed, causing him to gradually lose his mind. Seeing that his companion had fallen into an extremely terrible state, Xian Fu's expression also became extremely ugly. This was because after receiving that sword strike, he had also suffered heavy injuries. If he continued to fight, his chances of winning would become extremely slim. Could it be that he had to leave just like that? Leaving decisively now was the most correct thing to do. But there was a very strange thought driving him to fight with all his might. This was also the reason why Xian Fu did not turn and leave immediately after the unforeseen event. Xian Fu's inexplicable thought, and the more he was in his mind, the more he was in his mind, the more he felt. Xiao Yang turned around and saw that Xian Rin had no intention of leaving. He knew that Xian Rin had probably fallen into the poisonous illusion of the Moe Jade Lotus. At this moment, Xiao Yang could not help but secretly let out a sigh of relief. As such, he had a rough estimate in his heart. The effects of the Moe Jade Lotus were indeed extraordinary. Speaking of which, the Moe Jade Lotus had existed for tens of thousands of years. The amount of spiritual energy and power it had absorbed was naturally not to be underestimated. Xiao Yang walked over with some difficulty. He did not have the time to care about his injuries. His priority was to kill these two level 5 experts. However, in the next moment, Xian Fu suddenly stood up and roared. In particular, this lion's true form looked even more majestic. Xiao Yang immediately stopped in his tracks. It seemed that it was still not the best time to kill Xian Fu. However, he did not want to drag this out any longer. If he used some more methods to change the situation, he was afraid that the losses would be even greater. Princess Mingzhu glanced at him indifferently and slashed down with her sword, killing Ba Feng first. Although the surviving Xian Fu was still struggling bitterly, the poison in his body was acting up more and more violently. Moreover, the main point was that he was not aware of it. Just now, he had scared Xiao Yang and did not dare to make a move because of his instincts. However, his consciousness had been completely confused and he had fallen into an illusion. After seeing the situation clearly, Xiao Yang was not in a hurry. Since Xian Fu had fallen into a trap, he only needed to wait a little longer. Since the Moe Jade Lotus wanted their flesh and blood, it naturally would not let them leave. Therefore, Xiao Yang turned around and went to Ba Feng's side. He carefully took out the tail needle and kept it in his bag. This was a good item. It could be used as a hidden weapon and achieve unexpected results. Previously, the situation was not good. Otherwise, he might even have been able to kill Zhu Hong. However, because he did not manage to kill Zhu Hong last time, he only had 2 in his hands now. Naturally, he had to cherish them. In fact, these 2 tail needles could be said to be Xiao Yang's killing move. The main reason for this was that it was impossible to guard against. If used properly, the effect would be even greater. We don't have to care about anything now. Princess Mingzhu frowned slightly and asked. Xiao Yang nodded first. Then, with a thought, he threw Ba Feng's corpse into the pool. After the corpse was thrown in, it still only caused some splashes. However, compared to the previous time, it was a little different this time. Because the pool water had started to boil, as if it was boiling. It was constantly bubbling. Hold your breath. Xiao Yang immediately called out. This time, the poison emitted from the bubbles was even more tyrannical. If one was not careful, it would be very easy to fall into it. Even if it was Xiao Yang, he still had to be careful. It's best to use your spiritual energy to isolate it. Don't let it touch you. Xiao Yang added. Princess Mingzhu did not hesitate and immediately did as she was told. Very quickly, she felt that the spiritual energy she emitted was actually being corroded by the poison. At this moment, Princess Mingzhu was even more shocked. The power of this poison was a little too terrifying. Very quickly, they also saw a shocking scene. Xian Rin, who had already revealed her true form, actually started to walk uncontrollably towards the pool. Although her speed was very slow and her body seemed to be resisting, it was still difficult for her to control herself. Splash! After a while, Xian Rin directly stepped into the pool and disappeared. This time, the originally incomparably quiet pool started to boil even more. However, no matter how the pool water boiled, they could not feel the slightest bit of heat. Instead, the cold air became even heavier, making them feel incomparably cold, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Chapter 25-26. Xiao Yang could not help but frown when he sensed the chilling aura coming from it. However, his gaze never left the lotus flower. To him, it was simply a great supplement. If it could become more mature and its medicinal effect became stronger, it would definitely be beneficial to his future cultivation. Who would have thought that there would be so many opportunities in the tomb? They did not know how long they had been in the tomb, but the Moe Jade Lotus alone was enough to make their trip worthwhile. Princess Mingzhu looked at the lotus flower and felt a little weak in her heart. She had witnessed everything that had happened. The lotus flower had the effect of bewitching one's mind. If one was careless and fell for it, one would be doomed eternally. In the end, one could only become a walking corpse and fall into the pool to become nourishment. Cultivators gathered the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in their bodies when they cultivated. If one could cultivate to become a martial emperor, the spiritual power in their bodies would be unimaginable and eye-catching. In the end, spiritual objects of heaven and earth were based on spiritual chi. Cultivators could seize the power of heaven and earth, so spiritual objects could naturally seize the chi of cultivators. The lotus flower seemed to have absorbed a great amount of nourishment and gradually began to bloom. The dark green light that it emitted became even more beautiful. At a glance, one could not help but feel intoxicated. However, the chilling aura also became more dignified as the lotus flower bloomed. However, the chilling aura would not freeze anything, but it would make one feel extremely uncomfortable. Be careful and guard your mind. Don't be affected. When Xiao Yang spoke, his tone became very solemn. When the Moe Jade Lotus bloomed, the aura it emitted was even more powerful. It could affect a person's mind without them noticing. If there was even the slightest flaw in one's mind, one might fall for it. Moreover, with Princess Mingzhu's ability, if she was affected, the consequences would be very terrifying. Even though Xiao Yang was skilled, he did not dare to take the risk. If she lost control, this place would become a mess. It was even to the extent that the MOE Jade Lotus he wanted to obtain would have many variables because of this. It might even attract even more people to come here. At that time, the effects of the MOE Jade Lotus would spread, and a battle would probably break out here once more, and it would become a living hell. In the end, the one who would benefit from it would be the MOE Jade Lotus. If it could absorb enough spiritual energy and flesh and blood, perhaps it could really be reborn and become a great demon. When Princess Mingzhu heard this, she immediately adjusted her mentality. Although she also had some thoughts, she did not dare to have the slightest bit of distracting thoughts now. She had already witnessed the tragedy from before. If she were to see it again, it would be an incomparably torturous thing. Who knows, he might even become a walking corpse without any feelings. That was the most terrifying part of it all. Princess Mingzhu had thought this through. Since Xiaoyang had said so, she could only do so. Sometimes, the more one deliberately suppressed it, the more one's emotions would become restless, and it would even add fuel to the fire. Xiaoyang did not notice that something was wrong with Princess Mingzhu, because all of his attention was on the MOE Jade Lotus. The flower was blooming, and it would probably mature completely in a short period of time. When that time came, he would keep it in his bag, and it would be a great achievement. Suddenly, another thought appeared in Xiaoyang's mind. If he plucked the MOE Jade Lotus now and consumed it directly, his power would indeed increase tremendously. However, it would be a pity if that happened. If it could flow slowly and steadily, he would be able to reap benefits for a long time. If he could nurture it well, he might receive great help in the entire martial emperor realm. With that thought, Xiaoyang made up his mind to not pluck it directly. After all, this item was something that could only be found by chance. If he consumed it easily, it would be a waste of God's gift. At that moment, Xiaoyang really needed to increase his power and realm quickly, but it was inappropriate to use such a method. At least, in the long run, it would be a loss. After thinking about it clearly, Xiaoyang took out the mountain river map and performed a gesture. Instantly, the space around him began to change. As long as he kept this item in the mountain river map, he could use it for a long time. In this aspect, Xiaoyang was quite proud. As long as he could follow this train of thought, his power would increase rapidly. Princess Mingzhu looked at the mountain river map and immediately thought of the 10 directions, 8 wasteland map that her father, the emperor god, had. This type of magic weapon had always achieved the same result through different means. However, the 10 directions, 8 wasteland map was refined with a great divine power and opened up a world within it. However, to store other items in the mountain river map, this was unheard of. There seemed to be too many secrets on this man, and most of them were unknown to the public. After interacting with him for so long, even Princess Mingzhu did not dare to say that she truly understood Xiaoyang. How capable was he? How many tricks did he have? Xiaoyang, on the other hand, was fully focused. He carefully sensed the changes in his surroundings. The MOE Jade Lotus had fully bloomed and matured. The aura that it exuded was even more terrifying. Even Xiaoyang had some illusions in front of him. However, Xiaoyang knew very well that it was just an illusion. What he saw was not real, so there was no need to worry at all. Even if those ferocious demons were to charge at him, he was indifferent. That was because those were all self-defense measures released by the MOE Jade Lotus. If he were to be affected, he was afraid that what he was doing now would be in vain. As for Princess Mingzhu, she was still persevering. No matter how one tried to influence her, she maintained a resolute state, which was to do nothing and stand there in a daze. The stately painting also unfurled and grew bigger and bigger. In a short while, it enveloped the entire pond and then directly suppressed it. Keep! Following Xiaoyang's shout, the mountain river map immediately began to close and began to store the entire pond. The MOE Jade Lotus had an extraordinary effect in affecting one's mind, but it was difficult to resist such suppression. Chapter 25-27. After a short while, the mountain river map absorbed the MOE Jade Lotus and the entire pond. It quickly shrank into a painting and fell into Xiaoyang's hands. Xiao Yang stroked the mountain river map, and the smile on his face deepened. He had gained a lot from this trip. So far, he had gained quite a lot from this fortuitous encounter. If Xiaohua could devour all of the spirit qi in Mount Tianhua, then Xiaohua's strength would definitely skyrocket. In the future, they would not have to worry about anything with Xiaohua backing them up in the Wanshou realm. In fact, he could even walk sideways. There was no need for him to sneak around and act in secret anymore. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang's heart became much more carefree. It was as if all the problems had been solved with the opening of the tomb. Perhaps it would not take long for him to stir up a storm of blood in the Wanshou realm so that they would not dare to do anything to the Four Realms Alliance. They would also be beaten to the point of exhaustion and would no longer dare to do anything. After watching the pond disappear, Princess Mingzhu's heart was filled with shock. Such a method was indeed very brilliant. In fact, it even made people feel shocked. She also felt a very obvious change. Although the place had fallen into darkness, it was not as cold as before. In fact, there was a strange aura. It was as if the dark clouds had dispersed. Princess Mingzhu also rubbed her forehead helplessly. The world was really big, and there were all sorts of strange things. She had never seen a heaven and earth spiritual object like the Mo-E jade lotus before. Now that she saw it, she could not help but be shocked. If not for Xiao Yang's understanding of the object and allowing her to guard her mind, who knew what kind of terrifying thing would have happened later on. Even now, she felt a little helpless when she thought about it. She was very powerless in this kind of matter. Because she didn't know enough, it wasn't easy for her to deal with it. It was very possible for one to be influenced unknowingly and unknowingly. It was not impossible for her to become the Mo-E jade lotus's nourishment because of it. Fortunately, it was all over. This made Princess Mingzhu feel more at ease. At the same time, she also calculated that they had killed 2 5th-level martial emperors with the help of the Mo-E jade lotus. As a result, the top combat power of the Wanshou realm would be weakened again. After careful calculation, they had killed a few 5th-level martial emperors since they entered the Wanshou realm. However, this was not enough to shake the Wanshou realm. In that case, it would be more difficult to conquer this place completely. Thinking of this, Princess Mingzhu sighed helplessly. Coupled with the unfolding of this opportunity, it was unknown how many terrifying things would happen next. Princess Mingzhu could not help but feel a headache when she thought about it. As the weaker party, it was indeed extremely difficult for them to survive in this chaotic world. Even if they made a wrong move, they would not be able to bear the consequences. At this moment, Xiao Yang came back to his senses. He smiled and was obviously very satisfied. "Let's leave this place first, and see if we can still be lucky enough to find something good," Xiao Yang said. Princess Mingzhu agreed, and the two of them continued to walk outside. The things here had been taken away, and there were no traces left. Hence, there was no point in staying any longer. Moreover, they naturally would not reject the opportunity to obtain more treasures. After all, no one would refuse to take the treasures because they felt that there were too many treasures. After all, sometimes one had to be greedy. When an opportunity appeared, one would naturally have to fight for it. Many times, opportunities were not obtained by waiting, but by fighting for them. Unless one was really favored by the world and had an opportunity fall from the sky while sitting at home, one would never obtain it if one did not fight for it. Even Princess Mingzhu, who was known to be extremely lucky when she was in the 3,000 small worlds. However, because she was always in seclusion, the opportunities that she could obtain were very limited. Back then, when Xiao Yang killed Han Jingming, the martial emperor's fate was emptied. Even though they were thousands of miles away from the God Realm, it was still taken by Princess Mingzhu. That was the terrifying thing about having abundant fate. After exiting the pitch-black cave, they once again entered the tunnel. There were many weak lights on the walls, and they looked as if they were about to be extinguished at any time. There was still a faint smell of blood in the surroundings. It was obvious that the killing and fighting in the surroundings were still ongoing. Previously, Xiao Yang might not have thought much of it. However, after keeping the MOE Jade Lotus, he realized that the things in this place were probably very precious. Therefore, it was normal for them to fight and even break each other's heads and bleed. However, the situation at the entrance was probably caused by the attitude of the experts from the tribes, which caused the experts from the other tribes to be dissatisfied. Hence, such a tragedy occurred. After all, the situation at the entrance was like hell on earth. If it was just a simple battle, it would not have been so tragic, and there was no room for negotiation. The Wanshou realm was never peaceful. The conflicts between the tribes had never stopped. The killing and the raging fire would never stop. There were many opportunities in the tomb. If they were lucky, they might be able to reach the heavens in a single step. Hence, under such circumstances, how could they miss such an opportunity? Even if they were to fight, what harm would that do? If they could fight for it, they could look forward to a broader future. If they could not fight for it, they could only bear the terrifying consequences. After taking a few steps, Xiao Yang realized that Princess Mingzhu's face was a little pale. Even her breathing had become a little uneven. Obviously, when the MOE Jade Lotus bloomed, the medicinal effect was too strong. Princess Mingzhu tried to suppress it forcefully. Under such circumstances, the two sides clashed and she suffered internal injuries. In fact, Xiao Yang was not in a good state either. In order to kill Exan Ren and Ba Feng, he did not hesitate to use himself as bait. The price he paid was not small. Looking at the situation, Xiao Yang sighed silently. You don't have to forcefully suppress it now. Even if the remaining medicinal effect has some effect, it is not a big deal. If you continue to suppress it, the medicinal effect will clash and your injuries will become more serious, Xiao Yang said in a low voice. Chapter 25-28. Princess Mingzhu smiled when she heard this. At the same time, she heaved a sigh of relief. She did not know much about the MOE Jade Lotus and did not know how effective it was or how to guard against it. Therefore, she could only suppress it with all her might so that she would not be affected too much. In the end, it might even affect the overall situation. Since Xiao Yang, who was proficient in this, said that it was fine, she naturally could rest assured and let the poison run its own course. Take this pill first and heal your injuries. I wonder what other opponents and changes we will encounter in this tomb. Xiao Yang's voice became heavier. At the same time, he took out a bottle of pills and handed it to Princess Mingzhu. Just now, when they subdued the MOE Jade Lotus, they encountered 2 5th-level martial emperors. Fortunately, Xiao Yang knew about the effects of the MOE Jade Lotus and had taken precautions. Therefore, they were able to deal with it calmly. In other words, they borrowed the power of the MOE Jade Lotus to be able to kill them. If they were in other places, they did not know what kind of situation they would encounter or what kind of powerful people they would encounter. At least, when that time came, the situation would not be so good. In a head-on battle, it would be difficult for them to defeat a 5th-level martial emperor. Of course, the main point was that they were in the Wanshou realm and not the Drifting Cloud realm. Once they made a big commotion, they did not know what kind of changes would occur. In the blink of an eye, they might be heavily surrounded and unable to break through. They had not achieved their goal. How could they leave just like that? Moreover, if they were beaten back once, the threat they could pose to them in the future would be very limited. Therefore, what they needed to do was to make the various forces in the Wanshou realm wary of them so that they would not rashly go to the 4-realm alliance. That was the only way to keep them in check. Once they found out that these two were only capable of such a feat, they would be able to find the right medicine and come up with some countermeasures after getting all the information they needed. Thank you. Princess Mingzhu did not hold back and consumed the pill. The road ahead was very long. They did not even know when they would reach the end. Therefore, they had to maintain an extremely good condition at all times. Of course, this was only if the situation allowed it. Even if it was not allowed, their situation would become very bad because of it. Under such circumstances, it made one feel rather helpless. However, The greater the risk, the greater the reward. The two of them walked side by side and continued to explore the tomb. Who knows, there might be some fortuitous encounters inside. The Shen Nan mountain range was extremely large, almost twice as large as the central region Shaoyang opened up in the flowing cloud world. It was unknown whether this tomb occupied the entire underground of the mountain range. However, after walking for so long, they already had some calculations in their hearts. This place was probably the same. From the fact that he was able to obtain the MOE Jade Lotus, it was clear that there were indeed many things contained in this tomb. The owner of the tomb was probably an extremely powerful almighty when he was alive. At the very least, in terms of wealth, they were unrivaled in the world. Since his wealth was unrivaled in the world, his strength was naturally not to be underestimated. Otherwise, it would be very dangerous for a child to own a mountain of gold. After walking for an unknown period of time, they saw some places that seemed to have been ransacked by bandits, leaving nothing behind. They entered relatively late, so it was more difficult for them to encounter fortuitous encounters. Of course, to them, obtaining fortuitous encounters was a matter of luck. Once it appeared, they would definitely fight for it. If they could not see it, it was fine. They would take a step back and hunt down those experts, using such methods to weaken their strength. Even in the upper 3 tribes, there were only a handful of 5th-level martial emperors. If one died, there would be one less. Without a few hundred years, it was almost impossible for a 5th-level martial emperor to appear. Otherwise, this was the reason why the lower 3 tribes could be ranked as one of the top 10 tribes just by relying on a single 5th-order powerhouse. Occasionally, when they saw some corpses, Shaoyang and Princess Mingzhu would avoid them. In this tomb, it could be said that there was fighting all the time. As long as something appeared, it would inevitably lead to a bloodbath. Some of the experts of the tribes were even more tyrannical. Even if they saw the experts of the top 10 tribes and felt that they could fight, they would not hesitate to attack. As for the consequences, there was naturally no need to consider. If they killed the other party, in this dark place, everything would be covered. At that time, they would naturally not have to be afraid of revenge. If they could not win and died in this place, there was nothing they could do. If their skills were not as good as others, even a golden immortal would not be able to save them. Therefore, there was no need to be too rigid. It was just a matter of life and death. In addition, the people of the 10,000 Beasts realm were originally dauntless. In a moment of passion, why would they think so much? It was fine for a moment. They would naturally think about the future. After walking for an unknown period of time, Shaoyang and Princess Mingzhu's injuries gradually began to recover. Although they had encountered many cultivators of the 10,000 Beasts realm along the way, because they hid well and there were no benefits, there were no conflicts. Everyone minded their own business. It could be said that as long as there were no opportunities, it would be difficult to start a war between them. These conflicts could still be avoided. After all, everyone knew that they would encounter a battle with the young master next. It was wise to save their strength for fighting for opportunities. If they did not have full confidence, they would be courting death if they casually started a war. Unless you were really invincible, you could do whatever you wanted. Most of the cultivators they saw were 2nd or 3rd level martial emperors. They did not have any desire to kill them. As for some 4th level experts, they did not easily start a war. Their goal was clear, and that was to kill a Tier 5 powerhouse. A Tier 5 powerhouse was an existence that could cause them to feel the pain of losing a Tier 5 powerhouse. However, 5th level experts were still rare. It was not easy to meet one. After an unknown period of time, Shaoyang and Princess Mingzhu heard some movement again. They looked at each other and smiled faintly. Both of them sensed that there was an expert in front of them. Where there were experts, there would naturally be fortuitous encounters. Chapter 25-29. The two of them had already expressed their opinions through their gazes. Only Tier 5 powerhouses could make them feel threatened. If there was really an opportunity, it was not impossible to fight for it. If they didn't have the opportunity, killing a level 5 Almighty would also be a great reward for them. It was just a matter of how they thought about it and how they felt about it. After all, in this world, there were not many things that could be done in one go. They needed to do it step by step to be able to gain more benefits. They both carefully suppressed their auras so that they would not alert the enemy when they got there. Of course, they did not need to be so careful. They were using the appearance of the beast realm. Even if they revealed their auras, it would be difficult for others to sense anything wrong. They did that just to make themselves feel more at ease. It was better to be safe than sorry. After all, there was nothing wrong with that. Moreover, once the war started, it was hard to say what kind of trouble would arise. Not long after, they came to a more spacious place. The place was chiseled into the ground like a hall. It was so big that it made people gasp in amazement. What entered their eyes was an incomparably huge statue. That statue gave off a majestic feeling. It was so ferocious that if a child saw it, they would probably be scared to tears. The statue was huge. In the hall, it looked as if it could support the heaven and earth. Even though such a long time had passed, and the paint on the statue was filled with the aura of time, it did not fall off at all. It looked even more lifelike. It was just that the feeling it gave people was slightly different. Perhaps it was because of the traces of time that made the statue look very old, as if it could collapse at any time. Princess Mingzhu looked at the statue and her eyebrows furrowed even more. She felt that it was very familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere before. But at this moment he couldn't remember anything. However, Princess Mingzhu was a very stubborn person. She really wanted to know what was going on with the statue. However, the more she thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. For a moment, she really did not know where to start. Princess Mingzhu read a lot of books. She had read almost all the books in the realm of the gods. Due to his innate talent, he was able to remember most of the content, but it was still a little vague. Therefore, it was still somewhat difficult to figure it out in detail. The more she thought about it, the more helpless she felt. Sometimes, if he remembered too many things, it would be an extremely difficult task to dig them all out. Xiao Yang's gaze only lingered on the statue for a moment before quickly moving away. In front of the statue, there was a man dressed in black. He was tall and powerful, and there was a faint smile on his face. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at the people in front of him with contempt. It was as if he did not place them in his eyes at all. It was complete contempt and disregard. In front of the black-robed man stood 3 martial royal realm experts. They formed a triangular formation. The 3 of them looked very nervous, as if they were facing a great enemy. They didn't dare to underestimate or be careless. However, their opponent did not place the 3 of them in his eyes. This made the 3 of them feel terrible and uncomfortable. Speaking of which, the 3 of them were the top almighties of their respective tribes. They were in the front ranks of the top 100 tribes. Speaking of which, they could be considered as people with reputations. However, being stared at by a junior like this still made him feel uncomfortable and unhappy. However, the black-robed man had the confidence to look down on them. He could even ignore them. This man was He Rin of the Blackwater tribe. He Rin was a 5th-level martial royal realm expert. His strength was profound, and it was hard for people to ignore him. Furthermore, within the younger generation of the upper 3 divisions, there was a place for him. Even the Zhu Lubin of the Scorching Flame tribe paled in comparison to him. Back then, in the battlefield of the Yin Flame world, He Rin had completed a challenge and killed that expert. It was also from then on that person's reputation soared, and even that person from the profound dragon tribe was overshadowed by him. Moreover, He Rin spent most of his time in the battlefield of the Yin Flame world. He used his life to improve his cultivation. If it weren't for the many changes that had happened in the beast realm, he had no choice but to return. However, he didn't expect that there would be some things that would appear and happen. These were somewhat unexpected. However, He Ren was very satisfied with this. Since there were many opportunities in this tomb, he might as well come and try his luck. He might be able to go one step further and completely suppress the expert to become the #1 existence among the younger generation of the beast realm. It was because of this selfishness that Hei-Rin acted alone and did not go with the other almighties of the tribe. With Hei-Ren's strength, those who could kill him in the Wansho realm were all his acquaintances, and they had no reason to attack Hei-Rin. The three of them looked at Hei-Rin, and their expressions became more and more solemn. Even though the other party didn't attack or even say a word, they didn't dare to act rashly. They felt great pressure. The three of them traveled together. They felt that 3 Fourth Order martial emperors could still fight for some opportunities if they joined forces. They didn't expect that when the opportunity appeared, there would be an obstacle in front of them. Moreover, the strength of this stumbling block was even more powerful, so they did not dare to underestimate him at all. In fact, one of them even wanted to retreat in his heart. Wasn't competing with Hei-Rin the same as courting death? However, looking at the reluctant look of his companions, he could only brace himself and stand there. He felt that it would be too stupid to continue this stalemate. There was no point in persisting, even though he knew that there wouldn't be any results. In fact, if he was careless, he might even lose his life. In the end, he still ended up dead. So, what was the point of the final outcome? Hei-Rin was still very indifferent because he had just arrived. The harvest this time could be said to be an unexpected gain. After seeing the situation clearly, Xiao Yang's gaze fell on the statue again. The pattern on the statue was very strange. It could be said that it was incompatible with some of the totems in the beast realm. The difference in their styles was like heaven and earth. Chapter 2530. No matter how he looked at the statue, it was somewhat familiar. However, he really couldn't find any clues in such a short time. Soon, Xiao Yang thought of the tomb of the god of sin. It seemed that he had seen such patterns in the tomb of the god of sin before. After thinking about it, Xiao Yang's eyebrows furrowed even more. Could it be that there was some connection between the god realm and the realm of beasts in the past? However, as time flew by, it was not easy to investigate things that happened tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. Too much information had been lost in the long river of time. It was not easy to find out the truth about it. Xiao Yang thought about it and couldn't help but laugh. He looked to the side and found that Princess Mingzhu had already fallen into deep thought. As such, he could also conclude that there must be some connection between them. He didn't expect that there were so many possibilities in the realm of beasts. Moreover, he might be able to uncover some secrets among these possibilities. "Lord Hei-Rin, the 3 of us brothers arrived first," said a man who looked older. After hesitating for a long time, the older man still couldn't calm down. After all, they had spent so much time here and they had been very careful along the way. It was not easy to come across an opportunity. If they just gave it up, wouldn't it be too cowardly? Moreover, if they continued to be so tolerant, what opportunities could they get in the future? Even if there were, they would probably give it up because of their cowardice. If they continued to walk like this, they would probably end up with nothing in the end. Such an action was really despicable. Such a method was also meaningless. Walking around the tomb was like drawing water with a bamboo basket or looking at flowers on horseback. Hei-Rin sneered in disdain when he heard that and said, "Is the opportunity in your hands? Moreover, I'm closer to it." Hei-Rin spoke very casually and his words were even more frivolous. However, it gave the 3 of them a lot of pressure. It seemed like a joke, but Hei-Rin had already expressed his attitude. As long as it hasn't fallen into your hands, the opportunity naturally doesn't belong to you. Of course, opportunities belong to those who are capable. If you can defeat me, whatever opportunities there are in the statue behind me will belong to you, Hei-Rin said with a mocking smile. When the 3 of them heard this, their expressions did not improve in the slightest. Even those in the same realm were afraid of this Hei-Rin, not to mention that their realm was a bit lower. Even if they had more people, they might not be able to form a strong force and defeat it. Right now, They were complaining incessantly in their hearts. Could it be that their luck was that bad? Hei Ren's expression remained unchanged, but there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. He wanted to see if these old fellows had the guts to compete with him for this opportunity. If they had the guts, then Hei Ren would naturally respect them and defeat them. If they didn't even have the courage to make a move, what qualifications did they have to obtain the opportunity here? If they made a choice, it was their business. Hei Ren was also very patient. He felt that waiting a little longer was nothing. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. How could they have the guts to compete with Hei Ren? The reason why they continued to stand here was entirely because they were unwilling to part with it. If they were really allowed to fight, even if they were given more courage, they still wouldn't dare to do so. Hei Ren was a figure who had killed his way out of the battlefield. Sometimes he didn't even know how to control his strength. They were reputable figures in the top 100 tribes, but in front of the top 10 tribes, they were still not enough. What's more, they were existences of the upper 3 tribes. The 3 of them were also very complicated. Even though they already knew the result, they were still somewhat unwilling. However, asking them to fight was also something they didn't dare to do. If they were to fight, then they would definitely be at a disadvantage or even lose their lives. Hei Ren saw their hesitation and shook his head helplessly and sighed. These fellows were all brave and fierce, but in front of a true powerhouse, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It really made people feel helpless. With such a temperament, they wanted to obtain an opportunity and ride the wind. Even if it was given to them, it wouldn't be of much use. If you don't dare, then scram. Hei Ren coldly reprimanded. Hei Ren had some understanding of the mentality of these fellows. Since they were given a chance but didn't cherish it, it was better to not see it. The 3 of them were indeed very reluctant, but seeing Hei Ren's anger, they didn't dare to think too much and quickly retreated. Seeing the 3 stage 4 powerhouses run away with their tails between their legs, Hei Ren laughed, but more than that he sneered. Soon after, Hei Ren quickly put away his smile and looked at Xiaoyang, saying in a deep voice, "You two still have it left? Do you want to fight with me?" Because the 3 of them retreated, Hei Ren's mood became much worse, so he was also very irritated and lost his patience. Xiaoyang smiled indifferently. Since he came to this place, it wasn't surprising that he was discovered by the other party. Hei Ren was a stage 5 powerhouse, so his strength was naturally not bad. At the same time, he wasn't blind. Xiaoyang glanced sideways and saw that Princess Mingzhu was still deep in thought, so he calmly walked out. Since he was already discovered, there was no need to hide anymore. Moreover, the terrain here was empty to begin with. It was almost impossible for him to hide. Seeing that the other party didn't retreat, but instead took the initiative to walk out, Hei Ren smiled and nodded with satisfaction. As long as one had the courage to face it, one could become a true powerhouse. If everything was under one's control, then no matter what, it would become clear and boring. You are the first person who dares to take the initiative to walk over. Do you know who I am? Hei Ren also joked with a smile. The ignorant were bold. This was also an unchanging law. Hei Ren, the proud son of heaven of the Blackwater tribe. Xiaoyang said indifferently. He got this information from Bai Xingyun and the other's divine sense. This person's strength was indeed not to be underestimated. In this regard, Xiaoyang was also quite excited. If Hei Ren was killed here, then the Blackwater tribe would probably go crazy because of this. It was very likely that more internal strife would break out because of the position of the patriarch in the future. The Blackwater tribe could be said to be full of talents, and there were also many outstanding geniuses among the younger generation. However, Hei Ren, with the cultivation of a stage 5 martial emperor, suppressed all the heroes and stood proudly on the top of the mountain, making everyone submit to him. Chapter 25:31. Hei Ren couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the other party's words. Then he smiled. Since this kid knew his identity and still dared to come out, It was enough to see that his courage was not bad. Perhaps they were the same type of people. They wanted to challenge existences stronger than themselves in order to improve their cultivation. In He Ren's opinion, this was the only way to constantly refresh his limits to achieve the goal of increasing his strength. Fighting against someone weaker than him wouldn't have much of an effect. You're very good. You know my identity, and yet you don't retreat. This courage is very admirable. He Ren smiled. Although the aura displayed by the young man in front of him could be hidden, the resoluteness in his expression was enough to make people admire him. This wasn't something that anyone could do. Most people had psychological problems. Moreover, the voice was neither servile nor overbearing. There was no emotional fluctuation, as if he was looking at the other party on the same level. Xiao Yang waved his hand and said, "This little bit of courage is nothing to be respected." He Ren smiled when he heard that. In the myriad beast realm, there were many self-proclaimed geniuses who wanted to get his recognition. But he didn't even look at them. Instead, he felt that the person in front of him was somewhat interesting. If he really had some strength, he could indeed be nurtured well. Who knows? There might be some unexpected surprises in the future. You're really good. You're very much to my liking. He Ren said and laughed. The opportunity in the tomb had indeed gathered the heroes of the myriad beast realm here. It was indeed good to be able to see such a person. However, He Ren couldn't tell which tribe this person was from, or a rising star of the tribe. In the end, He Ren shook his head. He felt that it was normal. He had been stationed in the Flame realm battlefield all year round. He didn't know about some people who suddenly appeared in the myriad beast realm. Moreover, in his eyes, there was only that person from the Black Dragon tribe. In his eyes, he was simply not interested in looking at others. As for admiring the young man in front of him, He Ren felt that it was just a whim. Of course, if he really had the ability, he could also throw out an olive branch and let him be a vassal of the Black Water tribe. Such a great talent was still something that could not be sought after. Xiao Yang smiled indifferently. At the same time, he began to plan quickly in his mind. It would not be easy to kill the Black Ren in a head-on battle. Furthermore, Princess Mingzhu had sunk into deep thought because of the statue. It would be difficult for her to join the battle for the time being. Therefore, it would be difficult for him to face it alone. If this was the flowing cloud world, Xiao Yang would not be afraid at all. However, this place was the realm of beasts. Although Xiao Yang had a good foundation, his opponents were also top geniuses from their world. Such an existence was not some random person who could easily surpass their realm and succeed in a challenge. They were all geniuses, so they naturally knew how powerful he was. It seems like you're still a little nervous. Why are you still weighing the pros and cons? Do you want to fight me? If you're afraid, then feel free to leave. He Ren teased. Sometimes a person could indeed be good at pretending. Anyone could bluff. However, there were very few who could persist in the face of great pressure. If you want to know what kind of opportunity is inside this statue, then it's simple. Defeat me, then this opportunity will naturally belong to you. As He Ren spoke, the smile on the corner of her mouth became a little more confident. In He Ren's opinion, in the realm of beasts, as long as it was not the few old guys who could defeat him, even among opponents in the same realm, there were only a few who could defeat him. Thinking of this, the smile at the corner of He Ren's mouth became more intense. In He Ren's opinion, it was not confidence. It was just how it should be. There was nothing strange about it. It seems that I can only ask for advice today. Xiao Yang took a deep breath and said in a low voice. The appearance of He Ren could be said to be a pleasant surprise. However, he was also serious about his desire to kill. This person had been fighting in the battlefield of the Flame world. Not to mention his strength, his temperament was also extremely terrifying. If he joined the war to invade the Four Realms Alliance in the future, there would be many experts who would fall in his hands. Therefore, it was a good thing to eliminate such a dangerous person as soon as possible. Xiaoyang took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. At the same time, he began to speculate. He did not know what was going on with Princess Mingzhu. If they could not join forces and he fought alone, it would not be easy to kill He Rin. Therefore, how to fight this battle became a difficult problem for him. Of course, the key was whether he could expose himself. Haha, good boy. You're the first person who dares to say this to me. Today, I'd like to see if you have the strength to match such a big tone. He Rin said with a laugh. The other party really dared to do so. This made He Rin feel very surprised. He even felt that he seemed to have seen his past self. He did not know if he had the strength of his past self. Even if he did not, if he had a certain strength, it was still worth cultivating. As long as he was not a boastful person, he could put some effort into it. At this moment, He Ren directly released his aura. Suddenly, it could be said to be overwhelming. The pressure of a fifth-level martial emperor was completely released. However, Xiaoyang did not show the slightest fear. His expression did not even change. It was a bit too optimistic to think that he could change his expression with just the pressure of the difference in cultivation level. Unless the difference in cultivation level was too big, it was impossible to suppress him with just aura. Seeing that there was still no change in the other party, the smile on He Ren's face became wider. Since the other party was able to block his pressure, then his cultivation level and temperament must be high. Then he did not know whether the other party would be just for show or not. These could only be tested after the fight. No matter how much he thought about it now, it would be meaningless. Thinking of this, He Rin frowned and began to plan in his heart. Xiaoyang waved his hand and a bolt of lightning burst out. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a lightning spear. Holding it in his hand, it looked very domineering. Since Princess Mingzhu had not joined the battle, he had to be careful and try not to expose his identity. Chapter 2532. Seeing the lightning flash, He Ren frowned slightly. In the beast realm, only the White Bear tribe could control such power among the top 10 tribes. Even among the top 100 tribes, it was pitifully few. After all, to control the power of lightning, one needed talent. If one was not blessed by the heavens, it was almost impossible to obtain such a great increase. Therefore, He Rin was also somewhat puzzled. The White Bear tribe was almost in a state of extermination, and he knew those who had some strength. However, the young man in front of him was extremely unfamiliar, and he had never seen him before. Then who exactly was he? Thinking of this, He Ren's brows furrowed even more. This was because he felt that there was something wrong with this matter. There were also many doubts in his heart. However, the turmoil within could not be clearly explained in a few words. Of course, in the beast realm, anything could happen. It wouldn't be surprising if there were other secrets or possibilities in this person's body. There had been some people who had undergone a mutation during their cultivation, and it was not surprising that they had reversed many possibilities. Most of the time, abilities were bestowed by the heavens. In the next moment, Xiaoyang had already moved. He held the lightning spear in his hand and waved it. Suddenly, the atmosphere became extremely tense because of the explosion of the lightning elements. However, He Rin turned a blind eye to it and did not take such an attack to heart. He had absolute confidence in his own strength. However, as the opponent's attack got closer and closer, He Ren's expression changed. I didn't expect him to be a 4th-level martial emperor. No wonder he is so confident. He Ren suddenly laughed and muttered. Although there were many 4th-level martial emperors in the Wanshou realm, those who could reach this level were already considered to be powerful figures. Even in the upper 3 divisions, 4th-level martial emperors could enter the core. The situation where there were a lot of them was only in the current God Tribulation mountain range. Almost all the experts in the beast realm were gathered here. Moreover, the power that erupted from the lightning spear was even purer, as if there was not the slightest bit of impurities. This made He Rin think highly of him again. Such an opponent if they were at the same cultivation level, would naturally not be weak. However, how could it be so easy to fight across realms? There were many things that were not as simple as just talking about it. Some small differences were not so easy to make up for. In the next moment, He Ren directly punched out, appearing very concise. In He Ren's opinion, his punch was enough to break such an attack, and no matter how stunning the other party was, it would be difficult to change the overall situation. Boom! When the spear landed on He Ren's arm, it immediately exploded. Countless bolts of lightning rained down like sharp arrows. He Ren's arm was numb from the shock. When he saw the lightning suddenly explode, his expression became even more shocked. This was rather unexpected. Moreover, the power of this spear seemed to be somewhat terrifying. At the very least, this had already exceeded his expectations, making him more or less feel that it was somewhat unreal. What was going on? He Ren was somewhat dumbfounded. In the blink of an eye, the lightning gathered again, forming a new spear. This time, Xiaoyang did not hesitate at all and directly pierced towards He Ren's head, as if he could not wait to kill him directly. In the battle, even if he held back some of his own abilities, his attacks were still very fierce. If there was a slight opportunity, then he would grasp it in his hands. Perhaps this spear would succeed if the other party was too careless. Many geniuses were like this. They thought that their strength was outstanding and everything was under their control. Little did they know that the other party's strength was already beyond their control. Since ancient times, there had been many idiots who lost their lives because of this. When He Ren saw the killing move coming towards him, he was immediately shocked. However, in the next moment, the corners of his mouth revealed a very gratified smile. He Ren was also a person who had fought countless times in the battle formation. He naturally knew that these concise killing moves could only be condensed after experiencing countless life and death battles and battles. Many people pursued the grand opening and closing of the moves, or perhaps they were magnificent. However, they did not know that although they looked bright, they were actually just for show. These concise moves that concealed killing intent were what people needed to pay attention to the most. Those who could do this would not be weak. Therefore, He Ren was very satisfied. He really did not misjudge this guy's strength. This guy was indeed not bad, and he was also worth some effort to nurture. If he could make him a vassal of the Blackwater tribe, then he might even become the #1 warrior in the future. Such a person could only be encountered by chance. Even though He Ren had many thoughts in his mind, he did not stop responding. His hands were constantly waving, and his sleeves were immediately whistling. Suddenly, the space in front of him seemed to be greatly affected, and it was even somewhat distorted for a moment. The lightning spear also seemed to be piercing into cotton, and it was difficult for it to move an inch. However, how could Xiaoyang be willing to give up? He roared and continued to exert force, as if he wanted to directly pierce through everything. Although the speed of the spear had increased, it was still slow. He Ren's expression changed again. Then he suddenly spread out his hands, and a strange force gathered and surged. With the front of him as the center, the space there seemed to have become a vortex. In the blink of an eye, the lightning spear was directly torn apart. That force even followed the spear's body as it moved forward, as if it was unstoppable. Xiaoyang immediately let go of his hand, but it was too late. Suddenly his chest felt as if it had been hit hard, and he was forced to take a few steps back before he could stabilize his body. He Ren was also a person who had fought countless battles. Naturally, he could easily see through some of the clues. As for how to deal with it, it was as if it was instinct. There was no need to think about it at all. Xiaoyang took a deep breath, and the way he looked at He Ren changed again. His previous actions had more or less been probing the other party. He did not expect that this guy's response would be so appropriate. His ability was immeasurable. It was almost impossible to take advantage of the opponent's mistake and kill him. No matter how he looked at it, Killing this person was a difficult task.